The VIPER Ledger, a London conspiracy thriller, by Arthur Blackwood. Copyright 2025 Arthur Blackwood. All rights reserved. Prologue. The man died twice. The first time was in the minutes between two CCTV cameras. 38 unrecorded steps along a narrow service alley behind the Civic Center. The second time was 6 hours later, when his heart stopped for good on a plastic mattress in the basement of St. Bartholomew's, labeled John Doe, 2:16 a.m. He had no ID, no wallet, no phone. Just a single sheet of paper folded 4 times inside his jacket. The paper was laminated, as if someone had wanted the information to outlive the man who carried it. On one side, there were numbers, rows and columns, the language of accountants. On the other, a single printed word in block capitals, pastoral. The attending officer wrote possible mugging in the report, but he didn't believe it. Muggers didn't stab their victims twice in the same place. They didn't take the shoes, but leave the watch. They didn't wipe the handle of the knife and set it neatly on the body's chest, as if offering it back. By dawn, the alley was hosed clean. The shop that owned the CCTV system handed over footage that began 20 seconds too late. The footage showed only an empty street, wet bricks shining under sodium light, and the echo of someone whistling a tune that didn't belong to the century. The coroner would later note that the man's fingerprints matched no one in the national database. No next of kin came forward. No missing person report followed. His clothes were off the rack, unbranded, the kind bought by people who know better than to be memorable. The paper, however, had been printed on government-grade stock, the kind used for internal budgets and committee briefings. Someone, somewhere, had made a clerical error. A dead man with no name holding a page that should never have left an office. 3 days later, the pathology lab caught fire. The sprinklers failed. The CCTV recorder malfunctioned. The evidence locker was found open, the lock intact. The incident report closed with 6 words that had begun to appear more often in London's bureaucratic vocabulary. No further action deemed necessary. But there was one person who noticed, the woman who logged the death certificate, a junior clerk whose job was to enter data, not question it. She saw the signature at the bottom of the scan form and frowned. Because the name of the attending officer, the man officially responsible for the scene, was the same as her brother's, and her brother had been dead for 8 years. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she printed the record, folded it, and placed it inside a brown envelope. On the back, she wrote a single line in shaky pen. "You were right about the payments. S." Then she left her desk at lunch, walked to the car park, and slid the envelope under the windshield wiper of a 10-year-old Honda parked beside the river. Chapter 1. The note under the wiper. The message arrived on recycled paper, creased twice, tucked under Thomas Hale's windshield wiper like a takeaway flyer. The kind of thing you'd throw away without looking, unless you'd been waiting for it. Rain had turned the ink into small blue bruises. He lifted it by the corner, unfolded it against the wind, and read, "You were right about the payments. S. Holborn Viaduct. Tonight, 2340. Bring nothing. Ask for the vicar." He didn't recognize the handwriting, but he knew the initial, S. He folded the note slowly, slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket, and let his gaze sweep the near-empty car park. The other vehicles stood like tired beasts in the rain, their mirrors reflecting nothing useful. Beyond them, the Thames moved under a gray lit of sky, too slow and too silent. It should have felt like triumph, the moment when the pattern he'd been tracing finally blinked into shape. Instead, he felt something colder, a soundless warning, like standing on a frozen pond and hearing it sing beneath your feet. Thomas Hale had been an auditor once, a quiet man paid to notice what others missed. He'd worked inside the borough's financial department for 11 years, long enough to understand that numbers told stories, and sometimes those stories were not supposed to be heard. Now, 3 years after resigning under what he still called professional disagreements, he'd work alone. Consultancy, investigations, freelance analysis for journalists who wanted the truth but didn't understand spreadsheets. He rented a small office above a dry cleaner in Wandsworth, where the air always smelled faintly of detergent and loss. For months, He'd been chasing whispers of something called VIPER, a fund that didn't appear in any ledger, a sequence of phantom payments written off as pastoral expenditure. Small sums at first. £2,800 here, £3,500 there, all within the limit that allowed authorization without oversight, all signed by different officials who claimed they'd never seen the forms. Each payment looked harmless. Together, they hummed like a hive. And now someone wanted to meet. He drove home through drizzle thick enough to hide mistakes, the wipers beating a rhythm that matched his thoughts. His flat sat on the top floor of a Victorian terrace divided into 6 smaller ones, each with a different smell of loneliness. Inside, he boiled pasta, burnt the garlic, and ate at the counter standing up. He washed the pan as if cleanliness could substitute for control. At 22:15, he put on his coat, turned off the lights, and left through the back door, locking it twice. The night tube hummed through London's underbelly, half empty and indifferent. Hale sat by the door, his reflection faint in the black window, tall, graying mid-30s but with the eyes of someone older. He changed lines twice, emerged at Blackfriars, and walked the final stretch in the rain. London was quieter at this hour. The city's heartbeat slowed, but never slept. He passed shuttered cafes, scaffolding wrapped in blue tarps, and the metallic scent of the river. By 23:30, he stood on Holborn Viaduct, an old bridge of red iron and stone, built for a city that believed in permanence. The lamps buzzed with pale light. Down below, Farringdon Street glistened with rain and oil. He scanned both sides of the bridge. A man leaned against the parapet, sipping from a paper cup. Another figure, a woman, possibly homeless, huddled by the stairs. A cyclist sped past, wheels hissing like whispers. Nothing unusual, which was unusual enough. At 23:40 exactly, he said into the damp air, "Are you the vicar?" "Depend who's asking," said a voice behind him. He turned. The woman from the stairs was closer now, hood up, hands bare. Raindrops beaded on the fabric of her coat, her breath coming fast, as if she'd been running or arguing with herself. "You brought your nerves," she said. "Not ideal." "You said bring nothing," Hale replied evenly. "You did," she said, almost smiling. "Good. That means you can still follow instructions." He studied her face, sharp, drawn, late 20s maybe. Not police, not press, not an amateur, either. Her fingers were stained faintly with printer ink. "I have something for you," she said, producing a folded slip of thermal paper, a small piece of a very large lie. She handed it over without ceremony. Hale unfolded it, shielding it from the rain. A faint printout from an old receipt printer. Columns of numbers, vendor codes, and the same recurring term that had begun to haunt his notes. Pastoral counseling services. All payments between £2,000 and £4,000. All marked approved. All authorized by departments that didn't officially exist. At the bottom of the slip, a single tagline appeared in faded type. Dependency, Shepherd. Hale looked up. "The VIPER account," he murmured. The woman gave a short nod. They liked their metaphors. Shepherd, VIPER, pastor, all feeding from the same flock. "Where did you get this?" "From someone who stopped asking questions," she said. "He's the reason I wrote you that note." "The man in the alley," Hale said. "The one found behind the Civic Center." Her eyes flicked up, quick and startled. "You know about that?" "I'm making my business to know." She hesitated. "Then you also know what happens to people who get too close." "I'm still here. For now," she said quietly. A gust of wind tore through the bridge, flattening her hood. Her hair was dark in the night, cropped unevenly, as if cut with urgency. She stepped closer. "They'll vote on it tomorrow," she said. "Civic Center, Conference Room B. A contract extension that doesn't exist yet. If it passes, VIPER goes dark forever. The paper trail vanishes. And so will you if you're seen near it." "Who are they?" "The ones who sign and the ones who clean up afterward." She turned to leave. "Wait," he said. "Your name." She looked back, rain glinting on her face like sweat. "Names are receipts. Keep yours short." And then she was gone, swallowed by the curve of the bridge and the hiss of the rain. Hale stood there another minute, the printout fluttering between his fingers. He didn't notice the car that rolled slowly to a stop at the far end of the bridge, engine silent, lights off. He pocketed the paper, walked down to Farringdon Street, and tried not to look over his shoulder. When he finally reached his flat an hour later, his phone buzzed once. A known number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Hale," said a calm male voice. Educated, unhurried. The vicar welcomes new parishioners. Who is this? Someone with a ledger to balance. Go to sleep. The line went dead. Hale lowered the phone, listening to the silence of his flat. Too still, too polite. On his front door, someone had slipped a small white sticker through the letterbox. He peeled it off, read the word printed in clean black letters. Pastoral. Chapter 2. Conference Room B. Thomas Hale woke before the alarm, as he always did when the city had questions he hadn't answered. For a moment he lay still, watching the ceiling paint its slow dawn gray. The rain had stopped, but London kept dripping. Somewhere above his flat a pipe coughed. Downstairs, someone's radio announced a weather warning in the tone usually reserved for disasters that had already happened. He swung his legs out of bed and let his feet find the cold floorboards. The printout from the night before, Pastoral Counseling Services, still sat on the kitchen counter, edges curling. He stared at it over his first cup of instant coffee, the kind that tasted persistence, and told himself the same lie as always. You can still walk away. By 8:30, he was walking through drizzle again, collar up, the city half awake and half ashamed. His breath ghosted in the air. A police siren tested its lungs somewhere upriver, then gave up. He turned into the civic quarter, where buildings looked designed to outlast honesty. Concrete glass and a perpetual smell of disinfectant. Inside the civic center, everything gleamed in that municipal way. Too clean to be innocent. The reception clerk gave him a badge that read visitor. Consultant without asking what kind of consultant. Bureaucracies didn't need to know. They only needed a document that they had asked. He took the lift to the third floor. A laminated sign pointed him toward Conference Room B. He could already hear the buzz of fluorescent lights and the low tide of conversation. The room was larger than he expected and smaller than it wanted to be. Plastic chairs around a laminate table. Bottled water, sweating onto paper coasters. A tray of grapes melting in a shallow bed of ice, exactly as the woman S. had described. The scent of coffee clung to the air, stubborn and cheap. 12 people sat scattered around the table. Counselors, finance officers, a legal advisor, 2 assistants pretending to be invisible. Every smile in the room was an alibi. Thomas took a seat near the back, notebook open, pen poised. A man in a navy suit, broad, suntan in defiance of British weather, was speaking about efficiency frameworks and holistic partnerships. His voice was pure middle management theater. Before we proceed, the man said, I'd like to thank everyone for their flexibility. This contract extension will allow us to continue essential community outreach while maintaining fiscal responsibility. The words were polished lies, but Hale heard what wasn't said. Extension, continue, responsibility. The ledger lived between them like a shadow. He flipped open his notebook, scrawled. Pastoral equals cover code. Outreach equals cash flow route. Identified chair. The chair of the committee, a woman named Counselor Rosalind Dean, arrived 10 minutes late, hair damp from the rain, phone in hand. She apologized, blamed transport, smiled at no one in particular. When she sat, everyone else stopped existing. Dean had built her career on transparency campaigns, the kind that kept journalists busy and auditors hungry. Seeing her here, defending a motion buried under 3 layers of jargon, twisted something in Hale's gut. She shuffled papers, cleared her throat. We've all reviewed the amendment proposal, she said. Any objections before we move to a vote? A finance officer, young, nervous, raised a hand halfway. Could we clarify which department will oversee the counseling services? There's some ambiguity. Dean cut him off with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Pastoral Services operates cross-departmentally. Oversight will be distributed. Distributed oversight, the bureaucrat's synonym for none. Hale watched pens move. Pages flip. The small choreography of people pretending to understand what they were approving. He caught snippets. Pound 3.2 million projected over 2 years. Subcontractors verified by external audit. Continuity of care. He underlined external audit twice. Whoever wrote that phrase knew exactly what it meant. He would never be allowed near it. Then, amid the paper rustle, a sound cut through, a phone vibrating on the table beside Counselor Dean. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and flipped it face down. Hale saw the reflection on her water bottle, just long enough to read the caller ID, S. Bourne. He froze. The woman from the bridge had never given her surname, but Bourne fitted the voice, the defiance, the kind of person who ran instead of hiding. Dean continued, unfazed. If there are no further concerns, we'll proceed. The vote took 30 seconds. 11 hands rose. One didn't. The chair noted, motion carried, smiled, and moved to any other business as if nothing of consequence had happened. Hale closed his notebook, the faintest tremor in his hands. S. Bourne had called the chair of the committee moments before the vote. Why? A warning? A plea? Or a signal that everything was going to plan? Afterward, the corridor outside felt like a different country. Cool air, humming lights, the faint smell of disinfectant and fear. Hale waited by the vending machine, pretending to debate crisps until the last of the counselors drifted away. He dialed SS number from the previous night. Voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He left a message. The vote passed. Call me. He almost added, if you're alive, but swallowed the words. When he turned to leave, a man was waiting at the end of the corridor, mid-40s, security badge on his lapel, posture military. He smiled as though greeting an old friend. Mr. Hale, the man said. A word. Thomas recognized the voice instantly. The same tone he'd heard over the phone at 2 a.m. The vicar welcomes new parishioners. His stomach tightened. We've already spoken. Not properly. The man said, follow me, please. Hale hesitated, every instinct screaming run. But the corridor was a throat with no exit. He followed. The man led him through an unmarked door, down a stairwell that smelled of damp paper and old electricity. They stopped in a storage room stacked with boxes of toner and obsolete monitors. The man closed the door gently. Curiosity, he said, is an expensive habit. He reached into his coat, not fast, not threatening, just deliberate, and pulled out a plastic badge. Internal Affairs, Security Liaison. Officially, the man said, I don't exist. Unofficially, I'd like to know who gave you that printout. I don't know her name. Hale said, she contacted me. Then she's already dead, the man replied, almost kindly. And if you're smart, you'll lose whatever curiosity you have left. He stepped closer. Hale could smell rain and cologne, a bureaucrat's camouflage. The man's smile never reached his eyes. Enjoy the rest of your day, Mr. Hale. And please, no more notes under wipers. He left without another word. The door clicked shut. Hale stood among the boxes, listening to the silence that follows a promise. Then he opened his notebook and wrote one line. If she's dead, find out where they buried the truth. Chapter 3. The Girl from the Bridge. Thomas Hale drove west until London lost its shine, and the sky flattened to the color of bad paper. The road to Reading ran through industrial silence, past rows of warehouses and shuttered cafes that had never opened again after lockdown. The kind of road where you could disappear without ceremony. The meeting and conference room he kept replaying behind his eyes. The smirk of security liaison, the calm thread in his voice, the name S. Bourne flashing on Counselor Dean's phone. He'd left the Civic Center with a head full of noise and a conviction he couldn't shake, that the woman from the bridge hadn't vanished. Not yet. He'd spent most of the night combing through his old contacts, tracing public records, checking staff lists. Sarah Bourne appeared only once, an assistant financial clerk for Statham and Rowe Consulting, a mid-tier firm that handled municipal audits across southern England. The company's office address was in Reading, above a cafe called the Velvet Bean. Its website listed 12 employees. Only 11 profiles had photos. The 12th was on extended leave. Hale didn't believe in coincidences. He believed in patterns that hadn't been mapped yet. He parked 2 streets away from the cafe, locked the car, and walked the last stretch under an indifferent drizzle. Reading had a different rhythm from London. Slower, more provincial, but the same disease beneath the surface. Shiny developments fronting cracked back streets. Corporate logos welded to decay. He pushed open the cafe door. The bell over gave a small metallic laugh. Inside, warmth and the smell of coffee. A handful of laptops glowed like small altars. He ordered an espresso he didn't want and took a seat near the back, facing the staircase marked offices. Floor 2. The barista didn't even look up. He waited, eyes flicking between reflections on the glass, and the doorway upstairs. 15 minutes later, a woman appeared on the steps. Police haircut, long coat, expression that didn't belong in a cafe. She scanned the room once, saw him, and walked over. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I was told I'd find you here. D.I. Mara Kellan, Thames Valley Major Crimes." He blinked. "I didn't call the police." "Good," she said, "because that would have made you predictable." She sat without invitation, placed her ID wallet on the table like a boundary, and waved to the barista for tea. Her movements were sharp, professional, but not rehearsed. She looked about 35, maybe younger, with a face built for skepticism and a faint scar above her left eyebrow that no makeup could hide. "I'm guessing you're here about Sarah Bourne," she said. Hale kept his voice low. "How do you know that?" "Because I am too," she said. "And because you're not hard to follow, Mr. Hale. London Metro flagged your name in connection with an inquiry that died 3 years ago. Something about missing audit files. That was an internal issue." "Of course it was." She sipped her tea. "Everything worth killing for usually is." He watched her over the rim of his cup. "What happened to Bourne?" Kellan's eyes didn't flinch. "Officially, she's missing. Unofficially, someone doesn't want her found. Her flat was cleared 2 days after she stopped coming to work. Landlord says she gave notice in person. We've confirmed she didn't." "Who reported her missing?" "No one," Kellan said. "That's what makes it interesting." She slid a plastic evidence sleeve from her bag and laid it on the table. Inside was a printed page, water damage, half melted by rain. Across the top, faint but visible, pastoral counseling services. Hale felt the temperature drop inside him. "Where did you get that?" "From a locker in the basement of Statham and Row. Cleaning staff found it stuffed behind a radiator. You're the 4th person to ask about it in 48 hours. Who were the other 3? One was a journalist from The Guardian. He went quiet yesterday. The second was a solicitor for the council. He claims he never called us. The third was a man using your name." Hale stared at her. "My name?" "Exact spelling," Kellan said. "ID checked out. Temporary badge from the Civic Center. Time stamped 20 minutes before you arrived there for that meeting." He leaned back, heartbeat in his throat. "So someone's already ahead of me." "Or walking beside you," she said. "Depends on how good their shoes are." He let out a slow breath. "You think this ties to the dead man in the alley?" "Everything ties to the dead man in the alley," Kellan said. "He's the first body that made the paperwork sweat." The barista brought the tea. Neither of them thanked her. Kellan opened a small notebook and tapped the page with her pen. "Look, Hale, I don't care about your freelance crusade, but Sarah Bourne had information, real, dangerous stuff. If she passed it to you, I need it." She gave me a printout. Fragmented data. Vendor codes, transfers one account name. "Let me guess," Kellan said. "Shepard." He nodded. "Then we're already in the same hole," she murmured. "We trace that alias to a dormant government procurement channel. VIPER, Shepard, supposed to be for pastoral care programs. Turns out, funds were redirected into a secondary database housed under a false departmental ID. Where? That's the problem. The IP address leads to a private server farm in Milton Keynes leased to a shell charity called New Pastoral Initiatives. You'll love this part. It's registered to an address that doesn't exist." Hale frowned. "So it's a ghost company?" "No," she said. "It's a mirror. Someone built an entire duplicate infrastructure to process real payments through fake entities. The perfect laundering circuit, invisible because it's technically legitimate. And Sarah found it. Kellan nodded slowly. Or built it. I don't know yet. The sentence hit him harder than it should have. You think she was involved? I think everyone's involved, Mr. Hale. Some just wake up sooner. They spoke for nearly an hour. Kellan took notes in shorthand, watching him with the patience of a surgeon. Hale told her about the meeting on the bridge, the warning, the message on his door. When he mentioned the man who called himself the vicar, her pen stopped midair. That phrase, she said, it's turned up before. 2 months ago, a witness in another case received a text. The vicar welcomes you. She disappeared 3 days later. We trace a number to an encrypted network used by government contractors. Which department? That's classified, Kellan said flatly. But I can tell you this much. The same network handled the Civic Center's procurement emails. So the rot runs from the inside. She closed her notebook. It always does. Outside, the rain had thickened to a curtain. They walked together to the car park under dripping awnings. Hale's car looked smaller than he remembered, lonelier. Kellan paused by her unmarked Vauxhall, keys in hand. You want to be careful who you talk to. If the same people are using your name, they're setting up a paper trail for you. I can handle it. I'm sure you think so, she said, opening the door. But this isn't just about missing money. It's about control. Someone's buying silence across entire boroughs. Police, auditors, counselors. Even we're not sure who's clean anymore. Are you? He asked. She smiled. A quick, sharp thing. Ask me when this is over. She got in, started the engine, and pulled away, leaving him in the rain with more questions than allies. Back in London, dusk fell too early, as if the sky couldn't bear to watch. Hale parked near his flat, but didn't go inside immediately. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the empty passenger seat where the note had once been. On impulse, he drove to the river instead, the same stretch of embankment where the first message had appeared. The wind smelled of iron and wet stone. The city's reflection trembled in the dark water, like a secret trying not to surface. He took out his phone and checked his messages. Nothing. He dialed S, born again. This time the call connected. No voice, no greeting. Just breathing. Shallow. Wet. Then a whisper. Don't trust the vicar. The line went dead. Hale stood motionless. Phone still pressed his ear. The water below looked black enough to swallow anything. Behind him, a car door slammed. He turned. A man stood beneath the street lamp, half in shadow. Same build, same calm poise, same voice as before when he finally spoke. Evening, Mr. Hale. Still chasing ghosts. Hale took a step back. The man smiled faintly. You were warned, he said. The vicar doesn't like sermons. The man walked past him, heading toward the river. Hale watched as he dropped something into the water, a small plastic evidence sleeve, sealed tight, and kept walking until the dark swallowed him whole. Hale ran to the edge, peered down, and saw the sleeve spin once before sinking. He couldn't make out what was inside. When he finally looked up, the street was empty again. Just the rain, the lamp, and the echo of his own heartbeat. He stayed there until the river stopped moving, then whispered to no one, If she's still alive, I'll find her. The wind didn't answer. But somewhere in the water, something silver caught the light before vanishing completely. Chapter 4. The Vicar's Network. London pretended at normalcy the way a magician smiles after palming the coin. Morning traffic rehearsed its daily quarrel. Buses announced futures on their LED faces. A repair crew in high-vis vests fenced off a rectangle of pavement and stared into a hole as if it held a philosophy. Thomas Hale watched all of this from the corner table of a greasy spoon off the Strand and tried to remember what it felt like to be a civilian. His burner phone, cheap plastic disloyal, buzzed against a Formica. Kellan, you're compromised. Leave whatever address you're at. Walk to Savoy Place. South Side. 10 minutes. Come alone. He looked at the clock over the counter. The hands were wrong. Forever trapped at 10:14. He left a $5, didn't wait for change, and stepped back into the weather. It wasn't rain so much as a fine accusation. He crossed under the embankment trees, their slick branches black against a sky the color of old receipts, and followed the river east until the city's noise thinned. At Savoy placed a black Vauxhall idled by a loading bay with its hazards on. Kellan leaned one elbow out of the driver's window, expression carved out of impatience. "Back seat," she said, not looking at him. "Lie down and don't pop up like a meerkat." He did as told, feeling ridiculous and alive. The car pulled away, slid into traffic, cut 2 unnecessary loops that felt like ritual, then headed north by northwest. He heard the quiet tick of the indicator in the dark and the wet hiss of tires like voices conspiring. "Who's following me?" he asked the ceiling. "Everyone," Kellan said, "but specifically an unmarked Octavia that started shadowing you near Waterloo 3 days ago. Good tradecraft. Never the same lane twice." "Metro." "Don't insult Metro," she snorted. "This is private sector professionalism on a public sector budget. My guess, a security liaison cadre embedded with the boroughs. Your vicar probably signs their timesheets." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere no one sweeps because they'd be bored," she said. "Hold on." The car nosed into a multi-story in Holborn and climbed. At level 6, she killed the engine. Wind bullied the structure. Somewhere a metal sheet clanged like a lazy bell. Kellan popped the boot and told him to climb through. He emerged beside a battered pellet case and 2 backpacks whose neutrality looked deliberate. "We're walking the last bit," she said, slamming the boot. "Phone's off, battery out. Not airplane mode, dead." He broke the back off the burner and dropped battery and SIM in separate pockets on instinct. She awarded the gesture a fractional nod. They took a service stair to a pedestrian bridge and crossed an arterial road with the anonymity of public architecture on their side. Kellan led him into a 1970s slab of an office block that should have been demolished and hadn't been because the lease still made someone money. The foyer smelled of old carpet, old ambition. The lift jutted like a cheap lie. On the 5th floor, she unlocked a door marked Suite 5C, vacant with a key that clearly belonged to a different door. Inside, a rectangle of room, mismatched blinds, a table, 2 folding chairs, a whiteboard with the ghosts of old projections. No certificates. No pictures. The only decoration was function. Duct tape over a ceiling smoke sensor, a strip of aluminium foil tucked behind a cheap thermostat. "Congratulations," Kellan said, dumping the pellet case on the table. "You've been promoted to asset." He didn't sit. "I didn't apply." "Nobody does," she said, and clicked open the case. The kit inside made his palms damp. An air-gap laptop with the ports taped, a USB rubber duck with a worn label, a wrapped Faraday pouch, a small black device with an SMA antenna, and a satisfyingly legal aura. Kellan moved like someone who had packed and unpacked the same case in different cities. "We're going to look at the backbone behind your pastoral," she said. "Not through police systems, not through council networks. Through a hole the contractor left because contractors always leave a hole. We'll do it fast. We won't exfiltrate anything heavy, and we'll leave no wet footprints." "How do you have the hole?" Hale asked. A comfortingly boring story involving a seized laptop from a procurement analyst who used the same password everywhere and a help desk manual they shouldn't have printed, she said. "Also, people like souvenirs." She connected the black device, the kind of SDR box that lives halfway between ham radio and felony, to the laptop, flicked a toggle, and the room filled with a noise that was more texture than sound. She watched the spectrum waterfall shape itself into polite bands. "Fun fact, half the civil service believes offline just means Wi-Fi off," she said. "The new Pastoral Initiative server farm in Milton Keynes uses an LTE fallback for out-of-band management. If you know the eSIM profiles and you know what tower they favor, you can encourage them to talk to you for a minute." Hale watched her conjure an SSH window like a stage entrance. Strings of authentication scrolled. A banner announced a bland piece of middle management optimism. "Welcome TO Consolidated Governance Appliance. Root with a hard-coded password," she said. "Because God is merciful and humans are lazy. Is this legal?" "Only if we get something that embarrasses the right people," Kellan said dryly. "Look for your shepherd." Hale stepped in, breath shorter than a walk could explain. Directories open like unmarked doors. /pastoral/VP_CNE/shepherd/ a forest of CSVs dated across 3 years. Vendor IDs that looked random until they didn't. He opened one at random and met the humming shape his bones already knew. 2,800 pounds, 3,450 pounds, 3,995 pounds, 2,200 pounds. Counseling, outreach, resilience workshops, always under thresholds, always signed by someone different. Stop, Kellan said suddenly. There. She pointed at a column that served as a ledger's conscience. Approver_ID. One string repeated with an almost comic regularity over the past 9 months. VN, pen 04. Alias. Hale asked. Kellan was already running a grep through a separate shell, her eyebrows doing small arithmetic. Shows up in approver logs across 3 boroughs. Governance layer signs with centralized tokens. That's not a counselor. Who then? A directory up, keys/certificates/approvers, held a PDF that should never have existed. Onboarding, approverprofiles.pdf. Inside, the kind of glossy rubbish consultants produce to sell responsibility to the unqualified. Headshots, job titles, paragraphs of nonsense about guardianship and stewardship. Most faces were nobodies. One wasn't. Sir Alistair Penn, KB. Chair, National Procurement Council. Former Permanent Secretary, Cabinet Office. The photo made his teeth itch. Penn had the look of a man bred not to be surprised. White hair arranged in a style that implied gravity. A tie that had seen important rooms. He was the state's favorite kind of neutral, aggressive about it. Penn, Kellan said, almost to herself. Of course. You know him, Hale said. Everyone does, she replied. He was parachuted into modernized procurement 3 years ago. Champion of transparency. Scourge of waste, our very own knight of clean supply chains. Journalists love him because he returns their calls. He sits on panels where they pronounce words like governance into microphones. And his approver identity is in your Shepherd account, Hale said. Signing pastoral payments across boroughs. That's not plausible deniability. That's participation. Or participation staged to look like participation, Kellan said, jaw tight. If someone wanted a shield, they'd wear a man like Penn like armor. Or they'd put his face on a cardboard standee and hide behind it, Hale said. Either way, he's a shape at the front. Kellan didn't answer. She was already digging deeper, following the smell of arrogance. A directory of MOUs, Memoranda of Understanding, pretended to be benign. 1. MOU_civic_fifth_partnerships.pdf outlined a pilot partnership between council pastoral programs and faith-led delivery organizations to reintegrate at-risk youth. Innocent until you read the appendix. Bless vendor pathways, fast tracks, exemptions for urgent community response. A gorgeous blanket to smother oversight. At the bottom of the PDF, a list of charitable partners in small, unambitious font. Hale's finger stopped on one, Common Good Foundation, CGF. That's Lord Peter Wakefield's toy, he said, surprised by his own certainty. Media philanthropist. Any time there's a flood, he's there in a barber for the cameras. CGF receives money from pastoral and disperses to shell charities that contract back to councils, Kellan said, scanning. Circular economy of sanctimony. A soft click sounded in the room, not from the laptop. Hale looked up. Kellan stilled, listening. The building groaned the way buildings do when they remember the wind. After a beat, she moved again, slower. We have to be greedy, she said. 2 more pulls, and we burn the path. Hale nodded. He took a thin slice, a single CSV, the current quarter for Shepherd. Vendor list, IBANs, a batch of payment authorization scheduled for 1930 that evening. One vendor jumped out, not for its name, Hale and Partners Consulting, but for its insult. He stared at it until the font grew teeth. They put me on the vendor roll, he said softly. Pound 182 for 100. Community governance training. Kellan leaned in. Her mouth made a shape he couldn't file as either disgust or threat. So, if we pick you up tonight, you're clean on paper. You're working with them. You train the councils. Congratulations on your phantom firm. Company number? He asked, voice unable to decide if it was dry or broken. She opened a company's house cache from the same server, because of course the mirror system mirrored everything. Hale and Partners Consulting Limited Incorporation date. Yesterday. Director, Thomas Edward Hale. Registered address. His flat. Authorized person, V. Carr. Victor Carr. Hale said, the vicar. Kellan's eyes darkened. We're done, she said. Out. She closed the shelves with a lover's reluctance, ran a script that dirted the logs with believable noise, failed admin logins from facility and slew, a health check script misfiring, then killed the LTE session. The SDR box went quiet like a scolded child. They breathed. Either Penn is running a shadow procurement framework, she said finally, or his identities being weaponized. Wakefield CGF is a laundering membrane. Your vicar sits at the junctions and administers sacraments. Silence, absolution, erasure, Hale said. Amen, she replied. He expected victory to feel larger. Instead, there was that small, precise fear, a screwdriver sliding into a narrow slot. He'd told himself once he wanted the shape of the story. Now he had one, pen above, Wakefield sanctifying, Carr operational. It was elegant, obvious, stupid with cruelty. What now? He asked. Now we extract you, she said. You can't go home. Your door's a registered address for a crime you didn't volunteer for. And you don't call anyone, because anyone you call buys a subpoena-shaped problem. Do I have a say? Not if you want to be alive and free, Kellan said. I can place you as a confidential source. Paperwork no one sees. We buy 48 hours and try to force an official channel to open before internal pulls my badge. Internal? They'll get the same liaison you met, she said. Different tie, same choir. Hale pictured the storage room, the smile that didn't rise to the eyes. He pictured the sticker on his letterbox and felt, for the first time in months, the clean oxygen of anger cut through the fog. They killed a man in an alley, he said. They made him anonymous. They laminated the paper he died for as if they loved it more than he lived. Kellan didn't tell him to calm down. Pack nothing, she said instead. We'll buy a charity shop wardrobe on the way. And eat something. People who don't eat make stupid martyrs. They left the suite without turning on the corridor lights. Their footsteps a deliberate whisper. In the lift, the mirror added a version of them that he did not recognize. A man who had learned to fear properly. A woman whose competence was a blade she did not display unless needed. At the car, Kellan handed him a baseball cap that bore the logo of a chain garden center. Congratulations, she said. You love compost. They drove south by unflattering roads, Kellan narrating the route changes like a bedtime story for paranoiacs. We're not being followed by that white van. We're letting him follow someone else. We're being boring on purpose. Boredom saves lives. At a charity shop near Camberwell, they bought mediocrity disguised as clothing. Hale changed in a toilet that smelled of disinfectant and apologies. In the mirror, the man in the garden center cap looked like he gave talks about mulch. You wear boredom well, Kellan said as he emerged. Now lunch. They ate egg and cress sandwiches in a park that had once been a bombing site. The plaque on the bench lied about history. The pigeons didn't care. Kellan took a photo of a tree, then of nothing in particular, then put the phone face down beside her knee. Penn, she said, returning to the only conversation that mattered. He's either the spine or the decoy. Penn's calendar is public. He'll be speaking at a procurement symposium tonight. If we burn him in the press without proof, we become the story. If we try to arrest him without a case, I get shunned at professional standards, and you get a new company with your face on it. Wakefield. Hale asked, CGF. Untouchable until he isn't, she said. He'll claim he feeds the poor and shelters the weak. He'll have photos of fresh paint on old walls. He's the plausible saint. And Carr is the switch, she said. He makes the holy electricity flow. He's the one we can grab, if we can make him stand still. The wind pressed a shiver through the trees. A child laughed at a dog. London wore its indifference like a coat. Hale's phone, a second burner Kellan had handed him, Buzz once. No caller ID. He looked at her. She nodded to answer and flipped a small black box on the bench. Some kind of anomaly detector that paid attention to RF in a useful way. It stayed sleepy. He answered. Static. Then a voice he knew too well to mistake. Mr. Hale, do you enjoy your new company? The filings came out nicely. Paperwork is the kindest firearm. Car. The vicar. Hale held the phone away from his mouth, as if that might force his voice to be less than his body. What do you want? Some people want to be understood. Carr said, I'm here to relieve you of that burden. Stop. Stop moving. Stop calling. Stop asking. Keep your new company. Send invoices. Earn a living. We'll even pay you handsomely. You'll never be crusading again, but you'll be comfortable. And if I don't, then your new company starts sending money to lovely places. And your neighbors will see what they always suspected. You'll be an example. Examples are efficient. Kellan made a scribbling motion. He mouthed stall. You're talkative for a ghost, Hale said. Who pays you for sermons? A laugh like a file on bone. We all serve someone, Carr said. Some of us pick our priests. The line went dead. Kellan was already typing a number pad into her device. Her mouth a thin line. We got a wedge of cell site metadata, she said. He's careful but not divine. That call bounced through a femtocell, riding on a transport hub. He wanted the noise. We'll run it anyway. She stood. Change of plan. We go to the symposium. Penn speaks at 1900 hours at the Royal Institute of Public Administration, Hall B, not to confront him, to see who shakes whose hand. Front row seats to a sermon, Hale said. Back row, Kellan countered. Near the exits. The Royal Institute had the air of a building that liked to be applauded. Marble tired of being elegant. Brass fixtures polished by obligation. A banner in the foyer announced the evening's theme. Procurement in an age of scrutiny. Men who had never been scrutinized gathered in huddles and exchanged business cards that had never been read. They found the back row, as promised. A woman in a dress that belonged in a courtroom introduced Penn with adjectives that did not contribute meaning. He took the lectern and generated applause by simply standing there. Hale watched the room watch him. Power performs even when it doesn't need to. Penn spoke in paragraphs that had grown up together. Transparency, resilience, public value. The words bent light around them. He quoted an audit from a year ago that had caught 3 crooked contracts and extrapolated a moral. He told a joke about printers that didn't land, and everyone laughed anyway. He looked like a safe room with a man in it. Hale was listening for the absent notes when Kellan's fingers brushed his sleeve. Down by the side aisle, a man in a navy suit stood with one hand in his pocket and the other resting lightly on a pew of important shoulders. Thin, foxish, bearing the species of blandness that looks good on television. Lord Peter Wakefield. He was not on the program. Wakefield didn't watch Penn. He watched the watching. He said something into a phone without moving his lips much. A staffer materialized from the fabric of events and did what he was told without appearing to be told. Carr wasn't there. Or he was there in the men Penn thanked and the acronyms he blessed. After, the foyer swelled with what people call networking, because seduction is too honest. Kellan and Hale salted themselves along a wall. The important air shook hands with itself. Wakefield drifted with purpose. Penn allowed proximity, like a benevolent planet. Look for the moment he's bored, Kellan murmured. That's when people are most themselves. It came when a city council CFO with the breath of an old file stopped Penn to ask something about compliance harmonization. Penn smiled and let his eyes die for a second, then revived everything in time for the next handshake. In that small death, Hale saw not a mastermind but an administrator. Dangerous, yes. In love with control, yes. But an operator of ladders, not the one who built the wall, which meant if Penn wasn't the spine, he was a shield, and shields hide spears. Left, Kellan said. Wakefield. The philanthropist had moved to a less ceremonial corner with a man whose haircut tried and failed to be modest. The man's badge read Peter Vale, Director, Common Good Foundation. Vale's hand spoke more than his face. His thumb rubbed a knuckle in a rhythm that confessed guilt or caffeine. Wakefield's hand sat fatherly on Vale's shoulder. Vale nodded too often. Someone who would sign anything put in front of him if praise came after. Hale felt something click in his head. He leaned toward Kellan. "Look at the shoes," he said quietly. Vale's shoes were new, expensive in the way expense tries to hide, but the soles were speckled with white dust. Construction chalk, not the parquet of philanthropy. A site visit, or a rehearsal. Kellan's noncommittal grunt said. Filed. A woman appeared beside Penn with a look of having arrived from someplace more important. Counselor Rosalind Dean. Rain had touched her hair and been forgiven. She and Penn spoke in abbreviated sentences that suggested a language recently agreed upon. Wakefield observed the exchange with a priest's pride when a choir hits its note. Kellan's phone, set to vibrate against the inside of her wrist like a pulse, tapped twice. She stiffened, read the message with her mouth, and went still. "What?" Hale whispered. She turned the screen so only he could see. A secure internal group thread. One line. D. Kellan. Effective immediately. Please surrender your warrant card and firearm. Internal Affairs requests your presence 8 o'clock tomorrow. Attached. A formal suspension notice. Grounds. Compromise of ongoing investigation. Her face did not change. Her voice remained conversational. "We're leaving," she said. "We're not running. We're leaving." They threaded the exodus of authority and entered the London night like two unimportant details. On the pavement. The air smelled of wet stone and cooked onions from a van, doing a roaring trade in the hunger of the just and the unjust. Internal, Hale said. Because of this room? Penn. Because we rattled a line someone draws around their toys, Kellan said. They'll ask me to explain the unexplainable, and I'll explain nothing useful. That buys us a few hours of the city pretending to be fair. She didn't look back. He did. He saw Wakefield lift his head slightly, as if tasting weather. He saw Penn accept a glass of water from a hand that didn't belong to a waiter. He saw Rosalind Dean look for someone who wasn't there and find him anyway. By the time they reached the car, the day had finally admitted what it was. A corridor between doors someone else held. Where? Hale asked. The only place left, Kellan said, and her smile had a hurt in it he recognized. Your new office. She meant the Mirror Company. Hale and Partners Consulting Limited. The address that was his door. The stupid audacity of it. If we don't go, she said, someone else will. If we do go first, we control what gets found. Night shoved them south. They skirted the river, avoided cameras where you could, blurred where you couldn't. At his street, they killed the lights and parked 2 corners away. The terraces stared back with their old, beautiful, indifferent faces. I'll go in, Hale said. No, Kellan said. You wait. If someone's inside, they expect you. They don't expect a woman who's just been suspended to be polite. She walked with the conversational pace of a neighbor returning a dish. Hale watched from a recessed doorway, heart counting like a taxman. She tested the handle. Locked. She took a key from a ring. He hadn't noticed her lift from him and let herself in. The door closed. The street side. 37 seconds later, the upstairs light flicked twice. Her signal for clear enough. Come now, but don't be interesting. He crossed to the door, slipped inside, and felt the old house hold its breath. In the hall, on the little table where he kept keys and letters and the leftover coins of old machines, someone had placed a package wrapped in butcher paper and tied with red string. On the top, in clean block letters, one word. Pastoral. Kellan stood with her hands in her coat pockets to prove no one's finger was on a trigger. She nodded at the parcel. Do you want the honors? She asked. He did not. He did anyway. He untied the string with the care of a man, defusing a family heirloom, and folded the paper back. Inside lay a ledger. Not a PDF pretending at weight. Not a spreadsheet that would obey a formula. A book, cloth-bound. A ribbon. Columns ruled in ink. Names in the hand of a clerk who believed in neatness, because neatness is how you live with sin. At the bottom of the first page, a signature. Esborn. The second signature sat beneath it in a hand that made the room colder. VN Pen 04. Hale looked at Kellan. Kellan looked at Hale. Somewhere in the street a fox screamed like a woman being warned. "Congratulations," Kellan said softly, almost a prayer. "You have a ledger worth killing twice for." Hale touched the ribbon with 2 fingers, as if it might exhale. The paper smelled faintly of damp and toner, and something older, church pews, old libraries, polished lies. "Now we run?" he asked. "Now we move," she said. "Running shows the wrong story. We moved to a place we didn't plan to move to." She closed the book, tied the string again, and wrapped the parcel in an Aldi bag for life because the divine hides in the ordinary. In the doorway, she turned off the light. In the dark, their breathing found the same metronome. Outside, London kept its promise, indifferent and listening. Chapter 5. Paper Guns. By the time they reached the bottom of Hale Street, London had reset itself to polite menace. The rain had thinned to a mist that did not fall so much as decide to exist, beads suspended in the air like a decision. Kellan drove without the radio, hands at 10 and 2, the Aldi bag for life with the ledger on the back seat, like a passenger you shouldn't speak to. "Where?" Hale asked. "Someplace we can make a mess," she said. "Paper needs mess." He glanced at the bag. "They left that in my hall like a gift." "Gifts have strings," Kellan said. "This one has red ones." They cut south along streets that had mastered anonymity. Twice, Kellan pivoted off her route for reasons she didn't explain. A bus changed lanes to trap a car that wanted to be behind them. Kellan let it. A cyclist glanced at their plates with the suspicion of someone who'd had a long day. She smiled deliberately, a small social tax paid in advance. When they finally turned into an industrial estate near Elephant and Castle, the city sounded like low machinery and nobody's name. She parked behind a storage warehouse that rented units for life transitions, divorce, downsizing, the quiet violences. Inside, they took a service lift that coughed them up to a corridor of orange doors and unflattering light. Kellan led him to Unit 312, unlocked it with a key that belonged to an old case, and clicked on a single strip bulb. The unit contained a folding table, a scanner older than the century deserved, a banker's box of office supplies, a kettle with its cord taped, and a metal chair that promised regret. It smelled of dust in the past tense. "Welcome to my retirement plan," Kellan said, closing the door and snapping the bolt. "If Internal takes my badge, I own this cube forever." Hale set the Aldi bag on the table. Neither of them reached for it immediately. "You said paper needs mess," he said. "Explain." "Digital proves nothing to people who like not to see," Kellan said, plugging the kettle with the reverence of a field surgeon. "Paper rearranges reality. You want someone arrested in this city? You don't need a gun. You need a form with the right box ticked. Paper is a weapon, clean, deniable, frameable. They've been shooting you with it for days." As if called, his phone, the second burner she'd issued, buzzed twice in her palm. She'd kept it since the symposium, and now she glanced at the screen without handing it over. "See," she said. "First shot." She put it on speaker. An automated voice, calm as an undertaker. "This is an alert from your bank. Due to suspicious activity involving your company Hale and Partners Consulting Limited, transactions have been temporarily paused pending review. A representative will contact you." The message faded into instructions no one listened to. "Second shot," Kellan said, flipping through her email on a tablet that lived in the unit's drawer. She turned the screen for him. "HMRC, notice of compliance check. Subject, VAT irregularities. Time stamp, 7 minutes ago. Third," she said, almost gently, opening the unit door's peephole to the corridor, as if expecting a fourth. "It'll be police. Harassment, maybe, or misuse of computer material, because they like to sound technical." He tried to laugh and found he couldn't. "If I'd wanted to ruin myself, I'd have taken a holiday." Kellan finally untied the red string and opened the ledger. Up close, it was worse. Not the content. The content breathed like a man under a pile of coats, but the care. Whoever had ruled these columns believed in accounting as a form of prayer. Date, vendor, amount, description, approver. The pages carried the ghost press of a heavy hand, and once in a while, A faint correction in the margin, a nemesis of neatness. On the third page, halfway down, a neat entry. Common Good Foundation, grant dispersal, £248,000. Youth Resilience Hubs. Approver, VN Pen 04. A note in the margin, smaller even in the script. See St. Bride's Ledger, convening nights. The words were underlined once, as if they'd been written by someone who knew a future pair of eyes would be hunting. St. Bride's, Hale said. The Journalist's Church. Also the Printer's Church, Kellan said. Appropriate for paper crimes. She flipped. Look. Line after line of pastoral disbursements. Flows into shells that emptied into vendors whose directors were ghosts. Fallowfields Youth Trust. New Sunderland Community Advisory. Phoenix Coach Line, CIC. For every name, a company's house number that looked legitimate until you point a light at it. For every number, an address that resolved to a mailbox or a house that had too many names on it to be a home. Halfway through, a spidery hand appeared that was not Bourne's. The VN, Pen 04 signature never attempted flourish. It existed like a stamp of fate, unpracticed in talent, certain of effect. On 2 pages, a different sigil joined it. V. Car, written the way you sign a courier's touchscreen when you want to look ordinary. Why leave this? Hale asked, why not burn it? Arrogance, Kellan said. Or theater. Or they already have the copy that matters, and this is the one that leads us to the wrong room. Her eyes moved faster now. She wasn't reading. She was triangulating. We can't skin all of it, she said. We don't exfiltrate the world. We slice. She pulled a sheaf of sticky tabs from a box and began to flag pages with ruthless logic. Pen's signature in proximity to CGF dispersal. Car's countersign. Counselor Dean's initials buried in a side column. On the flyleaf, she penciled a legend that only their panic would understand. We make 3 packages, she said. 1 to a journalist they can't erase. Someone with a newspaper's lawyers, not a freelancer. 2nd to a politician who hates pen enough to be useful. 3rd to a regulator with an actual appetite. Names. For press, Financial Times, or BBC investigations. My pick is Amrita Bose at the FT. She's burned men like Wakefield on procurement before and lived to celebrate Christmas. For politics, an MP on the Public Accounts Committee who isn't hungry for camera time. Maybe Siobhan Kerr. She reads footnotes. For regulators, skip SFO. They'll host a seminar. Try NCA's IIB, the International and Intelligence Bureau. Contact there is Eleanor March. She keeps snacks in her desk for whistleblowers because she understands blood sugar. Can we trust them? Hale asked. We can overwhelm them, Kellan said. Trust is optional. Redundancy isn't. She put the kettle on because people do, and steam began to argue with itself. The 4th shot arrived. A knock at the unit door. Polite, measured. The kind that wants you to open before it has to prove what it can do. Kellan flattened, shoved the ledger into the Aldi bag, and slid it into the hollow behind the metal shelving where an architect had left mercy. She held up one finger, stall, and nodded at Hale. He opened the door on the chain. 2 uniformed officers stood in the corridor as if they had been posed. Behind them, a man in a suit who wasn't trying to look like a solicitor and succeeding. Thomas Hale? The taller officer said. Hale kept his voice dull. Unit 311, he said, gesturing wrong. The man in the suit smiled, which meant he was in charge. No, you. May we come in? For what? A chat, the man said. We're concerned you may be involved in harassment of a council officer. Counselor Dean has received messages from your number implying blackmail. And there's the matter of your company. Which company? Hale asked, letting his confusion sit on the table. Hale and Partners Consulting. The man said pleasantly, Congratulations on incorporation. Kellan moved without being seen. She slid into the line of the doorframe, out of direct view, and produced a badge she should not have possessed since the suspension, but still did. She held it between 2 fingers like a sacrament. This is a secure unit in connection with an ongoing inquiry, she said, her voice shaved of everything but authority. If you want entry, You bring a warrant with the right judge's name on it. We will not be entertaining a chat. The man in the suit didn't look at her badge. He looked at her face. D.I. Kellan, he said. Small world. Small cadre, she replied. Tell your liaison I still have friends. He smiled again, smaller. I'll tell him over lunch. He nodded to the uniforms. We aren't unreasonable, Miss Kellan. Mr. Hale, but unreasonableness can be taught. He slipped a business card under the door. It had no name on it, just a number, and the word pastoral in small, clean font. They didn't breathe until the lift wumped shut at the end of the corridor. Kellan locked the door twice, then once more because habit is a god. She slid down the wall to sit on her heels, eyes shut for a heartbeat. Paper guns, Hale said, holding the car by a corner as if it might be toxic. They want me to call. They want you to leave a voicemail they can move, Kellan said. We call on our terms. Which are? We don't call, she said, pragmatic as weather. We write. They worked. It felt like lifting earth with spoons. Kellan flagged, tabbed, photographed slivers with an old digital camera that refused to be helpful to clouds. Hale, whose discipline had always been seeing numbers what men tried to conceal, built a map on butcher paper. Arrows for flows, circles for shells, rectangles for departments that existed to hold doors open. At the center of the map, the triangle they had come to hate drew itself. Pen at the top, governance signature, public virtue, Wakefield bottom left, charitable membrane, laundering by sanctimony, car bottom right, operations, enforcement, deniability. Around them, the cities that paid for their modesty. Package A, Kellan said, dropping 5 flag copies into a manila envelope. FT, hand-delivered tonight to Bose. The ledger stays with us. These are bite-sized. Package B, Kerr, MP courier drop at Parliament with a note that keeps her intrigued but not tweeting. Package C, march at NCA. We don't trust post. We feed it into her hand. Hale looked at the camera card on the desk. If we send nothing digital, how do we multiply risk? We go Victorian, Kellan said. We write longhand in ink, photocopy on a machine that thinks the internet is something children made up, and walk across the city. We use you as bait because they already are. Comforting. She nodded at the ledger. You're the story because they've printed you on the program. We turn the story by turning the page. When coffee and adrenaline became the same liquid, they left the unit. The corridor had reset to its impersonation of safety. Kellan walked ahead with a bag over her shoulder, a passerby with bulk shopping. Hale carried the butcher paper rolled tight under his arm like bad art. In the lift, they watched themselves become small. Outside, night had nosed in early and fiddled with the street lamps. Kellan squinted at the sky as if it were lying. We split, she said. I run NCA and FT. You do Parliament. You go in by the public entrance like a man who writes letters. If we're tailed, we lead. And if internal stops you, then I stop them by speaking very softly in a loud corridor, she said. Give me 4 hours. He wanted to argue. He didn't. They set their watches and separated under a rule. No one had taught them. Move as if you aren't being watched, but don't insult the watcher. Hale discovered you can still enter Parliament with a letter if you look like a person who writes letters. Security scanned a manila envelope as if it could bark. A bored guard with a good mustache told him to stand by a line that had been painted on the floor when paint cost more. He stood. He did not look at the ceiling where cameras practice indifference. He wrote a note to Siobhan Kerr, MP, on a pad torn from a charities newsletter. Ms. Kerr, you don't know me. You won't like knowing me, but you read things other people frame. Please read these before someone frames you. If you find a phone in a quiet place after, call this number. It rings to a person, not to a system. TH. He didn't leave his full name. He did leave the number of a public phone box near St. James's Park that still, against the odds, contained a phone. The clerk took the envelope with a nod that suggested he had handed strangers futures across desks before. I'll have it logged, he said. If she's in the office, she'll see it tonight. If not, tomorrow. Tonight would be preferable, Hale said. Everything is, the clerk said, without cruelty. Outside, the darkness had developed texture. On the far side of the square, a man read a newspaper under a light too dim to read by. Hale didn't look at him twice. He walked until his breath called him back into his body and kept going. At exactly the time he had written at the bottom of the note, 2040, he stepped into the phone box and dialed his own number scrawled there. No answer. He waited. A siren somewhere rang like bad news. The phone box smelled like conversations nobody should overhear. He was leaving when the phone rang in his hand and startled him into staying. "Mr. Hale?" A woman's voice, brisk, double and undercut with law school. "This is Siobhan Kerr. I have your papers. I also have a vote in 12 hours and a career I would like to keep. Am I being lured?" "Probably," he said. "But if you're being lured, so am I." "You've given me copies that could embarrass Penn," she said. "I'm resisting the urge to feel joy." "Please keep resisting," he said. "Joy is evidence." She breathed once. "You've read my speeches." "Fine. What do you want?" "Not a speech," he said. "A demand for secure preservation of council records relating to pastoral initiatives across 3 boroughs. Motion on the floor of PAC, emergency hearing. Also, a request of the NCA for protective custody of a witness. The witness will be persuaded to despise you for the rest of her life if you fail. And if I succeed, then she'll despise you more quietly," he said. A pause, the kind that becomes a pact. "I'll log the motion," she said. "I will not be thanked. If this is a game, Mr. Hale, I prefer to be the wrong kind of player." The line went dead before gratitude could embarrass either of them. Kellan's evening had the texture of a chase formatted as errands. At Broadcasting House, she walked in as a woman who had been there before and would be again, left the FT package with a producer who recognized Bose's name and the electric weight of a manila envelope that might own tomorrow. At the NCA's secure entrance at Embankment, she asked for Eleanor March and held her suspension notice in the other hand like a hostage. March arrived with the posture of someone who had learned to hide opinions in her shoulders. Her hair was the color of the word sensible, and her eyes kept snacks. She didn't invite Kellan into a room. She brought the room to the foyer by the way she stood. "Internal," March said after skimming the notice. "Congratulations. They've noticed you're useful." "Useful to the wrong narrative," Kellan said, offering the smaller package. "Penn Wakefield. Carr, pastoral. Shepard. Names aren't proof, but paper is a beginning. I don't have a form to fill on this. I have a ledger in the city." "You brought me an index," March said, flipping a flag copy. "You're not asking for permission. You're asking for gravity." "I'm asking you to not let this be a police story," Kellan said. "Make it an organized crime story with a civil service dialect." "Protection?" March asked, plain. "For Sarah Bourne if she's alive," Kellan said. "For Thomas Hale now." "Where is he?" "Not with me," Kellan said, which was true enough for both of their jobs. "I can produce him when you can produce a room where the walls aren't rented to Carr's friends." March looked at the flags, at the notes in Kellan's small hand, at the kind of risk that makes a career if you choose right and ends one if you don't. "I can give you a number that rings to me," March said. "I can give you 1 car in 36 hours of strategic looking away. I cannot give you a safe house because I don't know where safe is. If this collapses, I don't know you. If it arrests something large, I knew you before you were born." "That's the correct answer," Kellan said, and meant it. March slid a card across the thin air. It had a number and no name. "If you bring me the ledger," she said, low enough to be a bribe, "I will build a wall." "If I bring you the ledger now," Kellan replied, "you'll have a leak in the wall before the mortar dries." "Then don't bring it," March said, as a surprise at her own mouth. "Bring me a page I can offend to a judge at 6 a.m. Kellan nodded. "You'll have it before dawn." They met again deep in the night, where the city forgets it's a city. A municipal library in Southwark that kept late hours because someone had made the correct argument on a grant application. The reading room had high windows and would that remembered fingers. Half the lights were off. The other half were embarrassed to be on. The librarian was a man who looked like a cautionary tale about posture and kindness. Kellan took the ledger to the map table that had seen too many ellipses and spread open to page 17. They chose a page not because it was the most damning, but because it was enough. 3 dispersals into CGF, 2 out of shells that contracted back to Resilience Hubs, 1 to Security Consultancy with a name like a mouthful of stones, Aegis Pastoral Holdings. The signatures, VN Pen 04 and V, Car. The marginal note that made the room smaller. St. Bride's convening, Wednesday 2230 basement. Convening, Hale said, like a parish. Like a reckoning, Kellan said. That's the night. He checked his watch. It was 21:56. The library smelled of old glue and attempts. Kellan took photos with the old camera and then, because rituals matter, made 2 photocopies on a machine that reported to no one. 1 copy went into an envelope for March with a note in Kellan's dagger hand. Judge at 0600. Request preservation order. List of target repositories attached. The other went into a book's dust jacket that would provoke no curiosity. She slid that book back onto a shelf between 2 fat volumes that time had selected to be irrelevant. Insurance, she said. From afar in the room, somewhere near the periodicals, a cough sounded. Not the cough of a person with a cold. The cough that says, I didn't expect to see you here. Kellan's head tilted without moving. Hale felt the room tilt in sympathy. He saw, in the reflection of a framed photograph of the library's opening day, a shape that belonged to suits and corridors. The man stood as if the parquet belonged to him. Thin, tidy, ordinary. He had a face built for walking behind other people's cameras. Good evening, Victor Carr said, voice soft as fabric, at precisely the distance that allowed him to be civil and terrifying at once. I do love libraries. They believe in catalogs. Kellan didn't reach for anything. The public isn't closed, she said. You should sit. I am standing, Carr said. And so are you. That's the problem. Standing makes people think they are an equal height. He approached with a theology of authority. He stopped at the map table, looked down at the ledger as if it were an unremarkable book someone had left in the wrong place, and did not touch it. You left this, Hale said before he could resist his own mouth, in my house. Why? Carr smiled at the way a teacher smiles at a student who enjoys thinking. Because we would like you to have a choice, he said. You can join us in the boring work of being necessary, or you can continue your noisy refusal and be made into paper. Paper guns, Hale said. You fired a few today. Carr's eyes went to Kellan. And you, he said. How are you enjoying your garden leave? Ask me when I planted something, she said. He nodded. You are both capable of useful outcomes. I am here to persuade you to pursue them. There is a meeting at St. Bride's this evening. Important people will be boring together. If you bring that book to the crypt, we can perform absolutions no court will provide. If you do not, you will discover that the world has invented a version of you it prefers. Invented, Hale said. You incorporated me. An act of love, Carr said. We build a life where you do not need to be so curious. Who officiates at St. Bride's? Kellan asked, as if asking about flowers. Faithful men, Carr said. Faithless results. He tilted his head at the ledger. Bring it. Leave with nothing but gratitude. Ignore the journalist waiting at Broadcasting House for a manila envelope. Don't dial Ms. March. Let your MP have a good sleep. And if we don't, Hale asked. Carr smiled and grow. It dimmed. Then you will be teaching expensive lessons to people who will not learn them. He turned without drama and walked out of the reading room as if nothing had been said at all. The librarian with the posture did not look up. Kellan didn't move until the door had finished swallowing sound. She exhaled an answer to a question no one had voiced. We're not going to St. Bride's confess, she said. We're going to listen. Hale looked at the marginal note again. Wednesday, 2230 basement. He looked at his watch. 2209. How? He asked. We can't walk in with that. He nodded at the ledger. It looked subtly like a bomb that used paper instead of metal. We don't bring it, Kellan said. We bring this. She tapped the copy they had made from March. We take ears, not evidence. We put eyes where Carr expects reverence. And if they expect us? They expect you, she said. We give them me. She folded the copy, slid it into a folio that suggested bureaucracy, and handed the ledger to Hale. He felt its weight like a verdict. "You keep the book and don't be a hero," she said. "You find a place that does not have cameras and wait for me to not die. If I don't come back by midnight, you run to March. You run past her to the BBC and set yourself on fire with paper." He almost laughed. "I thought we didn't do martyrs." "We don't," she said. "We do angles." They left by different doors. Outside, the city had dressed up as a parable. Hale took the long way to a storage unit he had never rented. Kellan walked toward Fleet Street, where printers had taught the country to read and priests had taught it to forget. St. Bride's rises out of the street like a memory of a ship. The spire is a tiered wedding cake, and the crypt smells of human intentions and the failure of them. At the top of the steps, a woman with a clipboard smiled a dry smile that said guest list. Kellan did not attempt to be on it. She waited. On the very minute, a group of men whose suits were smug but not loud arrived together and were nodded past without their names needing to be presented to a pen. Wakefield was not among them. Penn was, flanked by an aide who treated the air like a diary. Rosalind Dean arrived alone, a woman who knows she is late, because lateness is an instrument. Kellan drifted behind a pillar and listened to the sound of expensive steps. Below, voices arranged themselves into confidentiality. She counted them. 14, maybe 15. A voice carried that did not belong to any of the known men. A voice like glassware. Car. She didn't go down. She didn't need to. Old churches have events built by old men who believed in air. She found one in a side aisle behind a stone that had forgotten its inscription. She took a mic the size of a seeker from her coat, a coil of wire thinner than certainty, and fed it into the vent until it became a listening device. The recorder in her pocket pulsed, once to say, "I am not a phone." Through the floor, language unrolled. "We carry on as planned. Kerr will grandstand and will be terribly cooperative," came a voice that could have been Penn's or a man who practiced him. "The funds move tonight regardless via CGF. Vale has a new path." "Dean!" Carr's voice. Smooth. Surgical. "Dean will beneficially misunderstand until she is thanked." Another man said, amused, bored. "And our friend Hale?" Someone asked, a chuckle where a name should be solemn. "The parish welcomes him," Carr said, "or it prints him." Paper guns. Kellan pulled the wire, fast and neat, and pocketed the recorder. She didn't try to see faces. The city already knew their silhouettes. She walked out into a night that had become thinner somehow, as if the moon had called in sick. At the corner, a van idled with the lazy malice of diesel. She clocked it, cataloged it, then didn't look at it again. Behind her, the church doors did the polite work of letting men leave unbothered. She made the rendezvous 2 streets away by a statue that pigeons had privately renamed. Hale stepped out of an alley as if he'd been rehearsing emerging all his life. "You heard?" he said. "I heard," she said. "I have the glassware on tape. We give March this page and this noise. She gives us a judge with a signature that weighs more than Carr's smile." "And if March can't," he said, "then Penn speaks at a funeral," she said, not specifying whose. They walked without touching. On the far side of Fleet Street, a siren made choices. The ledger lay against Hale's ribs like a second heart. "Paper guns," he said again, tasting the words because names make the thing smaller. "We can fire ours." "We will," Kellan said. "But we also need a blade." "What's the blade?" She nodded at the ledger. "This isn't just accounts. It's a calendar. Look at the margins again. Convening nights. St. Bride's. Basement. We're not the first to read it. We're the first to stay alive after page 20. And after midnight?" he asked. "After midnight, we go somewhere that sells photocopies to ghosts," she said. "And at 6, March wakes a judge who enjoys the sound of warrants." They crossed at a light that did not believe in them and disappeared into a city that pretended to be asleep. Above them, St. Bride's spire cut the sky into tears, a wedding cake for a faith that had mislaid its vows. Behind them, in the crypt, a man closed a leather notebook and wrote a line that would alter other people's days. Hale to be resolved by paper. And the street kept listening. Chapter 6. Warrants at 6. At 5:42, the river wore a color that didn't have a name yet. London exhaled fog from vents and grates, as if the city were a machine cooling after a dangerous shift. Thomas Hale stood under the Hungerford footbridge with his collar up, the ledger zipped inside his jacket like a second spine, and watched the fox cross the empty road as if it had business at the ministry. Kellan arrived on foot, hair damp from a shower or from being the kind of person who never truly gets dry. She handed him a takeaway coffee that steamed like a suggestion and nodded east. "March is awake," she said. "Judge is too. 6 o'clock on the dot." "Warrants?" Hale asked. "Preservation orders first," she said. Then a narrow acquisition, council mail service or pastoral, CGF disbursals for the last 4 quarters, and procurement approval signed by VNPen 04. Limited, targeted, survivable in court. And us. "We don't exist," Kellan said. "That's our margin." They walked the embankment toward the gray neoclassical of administrative justice, where dawn comes with fluorescent honesty. Eleanor March stood outside in a charcoal coat that held an umbrella not yet open and a folder that could have set a bishop on fire. She did not greet them as friends or as strangers. She met them as variables. "D.I. Kellan," March said, eyes taking attendance. "Mr. Hale, you brought my page." Kellan produced a copy from the library, slid in a note. "St. Bride's convening, recorded 22:30. Name's oblique but present. Voice print suggests car." March's face didn't show surprise. It showed appetite. At 6:17, March said, "A judge will sign what I've typed." At 6:21, 2 of my teams will arrive at the Civic Center and Common Good Foundation, headquarters with civility and large boxes. At 6:40, I will text you whether I still have a job. "How public?" Kellan asked. "Not at all for as long as I can manage." March said, "Publicity makes people vacuum." Kellan's phone vibrated against her wrist. The haptic code she'd assigned to Internal Affairs. 2 taps, a pause, 1 tap. Told a story before she saw the screen. "Read it after," March said, without looking. "If they want your badge at 8, we have 1 hour and 43 minutes where you are technically a detective and practically a nuisance." Hale looked at the courthouse clock. 6:03 pinned the sky to a promise. At 6:17, a judge whose tie had committed to blue signed Preservation Order 4125 and its siblings with a pen that made a sound like a small door closing. Kellan watched the ink as if it were a fuse. March nodded once to nobody and became kinetic. "Go," she told a woman with a bob and a calm that had been tested. "You're civic. I want every backup schedule, every retention and disposal policy, and the password the IT guy keeps on a post-it under his keyboard. Staff will be charming. Say thank you and leave with the tapes." She turned to a man whose suit had failed to contain his competence. "You're CGF. Veil will be vibrating. Keep him vibrating. Copy the finance share and the procurement inbox. Don't let their lawyer move this to a conference room. Rooms make people theatrical." "And Wakefield?" Kellan asked. March's mouth made a shape that forgave nothing. "I left him for last." As the teams dispersed, March pressed a card into Kellan's palm. The same number as the night before. "If I text you a lemon emoji," she said dryly, "it means squeeze what you have fast. If I text you a clapperboard, it means the cameras are coming whether we like it or not." "Citrus and cinema," Kellan said. "Understood." March's eyes shifted to Hale. "And you, Mr. Hale, please do not be arrested before noon." "I'll pencil that in," he said. At 7:02, Civic Center reception smiled like a dentist. The NCA team, wearing their politest windbreakers, presented March's order and produced a trolley that looked too cheerful for its work. The receptionist began to call someone. A woman from legal arrived, already shaking her head. Disproportionate, legal said, because the law is a chorus. Disruptive, selective, lawful. The team lead said, because grace requires a counterpoint. This is a preservation, not seizure. In the server room, aircon made a white noise like institutional denial. A systems engineer who had not slept enough tried to look brave in a hoodie. "We have a data retention policy," he said. 30 days on email backups, 6 months on finance, then Then you delete, the NCAA lead said gently. Not today. On a rack tag will label maker, FIN03. A little green light blinked the rhythm of someone else's problem. The team ghosted their tools, clone what needed cloning, bag what needed bagging. The systems engineer fetched a carton of tapes from a cupboard marked stationery that contained nothing that could ever be stapled. In the corridor, a man Hale knew by the slope of his shoulders appeared without footsteps. Victor Carr in a council visitor badge that had learned to lie. He stood near the water cooler, as if thirst had defeated him. "Morning," he said, almost cheerful. "Preserving anything I can help you not find?" "Good morning, sir," the NCAA lead said with bureaucratic godliness. "If you'd like to lodge an objection." "Oh, objections are paper," Carr said, "and paper is our shared language." He didn't interfere. He watched like a teacher watches a bright child attempt long division, and he hummed under his breath the kind of tune that never had lyrics. At 741, Common Good Foundation tried to be a charity. Its foyer had photographs of smilable children and posters that promised community in fonts that had strong opinions. Peter Vale met the NCA at the threshold with a smile that had practiced sincerity. "We'll cooperate fully," Vale said, which is what you say when you have rehearsed cooperation. "Tea? Coffee?" A dignitary is visiting later. "Forgive the boxes." The boxes were new, unlabeled, and had that hollow weight of things that might be full later. In finance, a woman with hands that organized other people's hands attempted hospitality with a tray of biscuits. The NCA asked gently for the share drive. Someone said the word password, and three summons provided three wrong ones before the right one landed by mistake. Folders opened into subfolders into a place where numbers rearranged into narrative. Pastoral _grants _FI25, vendor __ diligence, faith _partners _ in the dispersals. The CGF money oozed into shells with pious names, and then marched back to councils as contractors with names that tasted like gravel. Aegis Pastoral Holdings among them. "Pull the last quarter," the lead said, "and take screenshots of metadata. Dates make liars cough." Wakefield did not appear. He existed as a framed newspaper on the wall, Philanthropist of the Year, and as a signature on a gift aid letter that had been drafted by someone else. Vale kept smiling until the NCA asked about St. Bride's. He blinked as if the church were a new concept. "We hold occasional convenings," he said. "Ecumenical, intersectoral. Best practice." "Best practice in basements?" the lead asked, friendly to the point of insult. Vale's phone lit. He didn't look at it. His knuckles rubbed his thumb in a rhythm Kellan had already filed. At 8:06, Kellan's suspension arrived like weather. An internal affairs duo met her on the pavement outside a coffee kiosk, the woman holding a plastic envelope as if it were a warrant for the Sun. "Detective Inspector Kellan," the woman said. Warrant card. Kellan took it out, felt the weight that had carried rooms for 10 years, and let it go. "Firearm is at the armory," she said evenly. "Receipted at 1912 yesterday. Your access to Met Systems is suspended," the woman said. "We require your mobile device." "It's my niece's," Kellan said. "It plays songs." She handed over a phone that was technically true. "And your whereabouts last night?" the man asked. "Asleep," Kellan said. "In the general sense." The woman's face made a shape that warned the world it had not heard the last of her. "Do not involve yourself further in council business. D.I. Kellan." "You've downgraded me," Kellan said. "It's Ms. Noted," the woman said, and meant it to hurt. They left with ceremony. Kellan let her mouth be still for the space of 2 breaths, and then looked at her watch. The minute hand was a weapon. She called March from a stranger's phone. "Citrus?" Kellan asked. "Not yet," March said, "but the FT has teeth. Someone left Amrita Bowes an envelope at Broadcasting House at 7:30 with just enough to make her ask questions. She's holding, but when she calls councils for comment, the spin will wake." "Good," Kellan said. "Wakefield." "Hasn't answered a call since 5, March said. "Either brave or asleep. I'm choosing brave for now." "And Penn." "Doing today on Radio 4 at 9, March said. "Talking about procurement transparency. You can't script this better." "You could Kellan said. But God lacks our sense of humor. At 8:29, Hale crossed Portland Place with his head down and the ledger in a messenger bag that used to carry groceries. The front doors of Broadcasting House made a promise no building can keep. He asked for Amrita Bowes at reception and expected to be told to email a general address. Instead, a producer with headphones and battlefield eyes appeared and led him past a sculpture that frightened better men. Ms. Bowes has 2 minutes, the producer said. Then the world ends again. Bowes' desk was a small fort built out of notebooks and intent. She didn't offer a chair. She measured him with the speed of someone paid to doubt. "You're the one who writes on butcher paper," she said. "I have your envelope. I have a council comment telling me Pastoral is a legacy initiative for faith sector engagement. I have a philanthropist who says he would never. What do you have?" "Primary," Hale said, and put the ledger on the desk without uncovering it. "You don't get it. You get a look. 1 minute. Decide if you want to risk a solicitor's letter now or later." She lifted the cover. Her face didn't move because her face had practice not moving. Her eyes changed color by a metaphor's width. She flipped 3 pages, found pen sigil, found Carr's thin hand. She found the marginal note about St. Bride's and closed the book as if closing a friend's eyes. "Provenance?" she asked. "Complicated," he said. "Good," she said. "Complicated keeps me employed. Leave me a phone that isn't yours." She slid him a sticky note with a number that had too many 9s to be random. "If I break this on air, someone sues me and someone breaks me. If I don't, someone else does." From the corridor came the boiled egg tone of a senior producer yelling pen in 30, as if the world needed to hear the word pen often to stay balanced. Hale wanted to stay. He needed to leave. He stepped back toward the lifts and felt the temperature of the air change the way a room does when someone you owe arrives. 2 men in suits that wore them approached with the bounce you see in people who enjoy corridors. The taller one smiled like a dentist who liked his work. "Thomas Hale?" he asked. "We like a word regarding offenses under the Computer Misuse Act and fraud by false representation. You're under arrest." In another life, it would have been funny. In this one, it was symmetrical. Hale raised his hands because the last thing he owned was time. "On what basis?" he asked. "Because words make you breathe." The shorter man produced a printed complaint with Hale and Partners Consulting Limited letterhead and a letter from a council officer claiming harassment. The signature at the bottom belonged to Counselor Rosalind Dean. The complaint was dated that morning at 7:58. He looked at the charge sheet and saw himself, address, company, bank, even the accountant he didn't have yet. "Sir," the taller one said, "Pleasant as St. Bridestone. Please don't make us get performative." Hale opened his mouth to deliver a dissertation on paper guns, and then shut it because dissertations don't win in lobbies. He glanced once toward the newsroom and saw Amrita Bowes watch with an expression that didn't do sympathy or neutrality. It did filing. The lift pinged. The doors opened. A woman in a charcoal coat stepped out and into the exact square of floor needed to alter gravity. "Officers," Eleanor March said, producing a document with a kind of quiet flourish more effective than volume. "Your arrest will interfere with the execution of Preservation Order 4125 and its adjuncts. Mr. Hale is a material witness in a matter under my immediate supervision. If you take him now, I will require the names of your authorizing officers for the court at 10. The taller man read the order the way a man reads the weather in a window. He looked at his partner, at March, at the edges of his days slipping. "Ms. March," she said, "National Crime Agency. I'm very boring and very hungry." A pause opened, long enough to be useful. The men stepped back a fraction, which in bureaucracy equals surrender. "We will accompany you," the taller one said, converting retreat into procedure. "For Mr. Hale's safety." "I adore safety," March said. "Walk with me." They didn't shake hands. No one ever shakes hands at the moment they decide not to destroy each other. At 9:04, Sir Alistair Penn told Radio 4 that sunlight was the best disinfectant. He said scrutiny 5 times and partnership 6. He explained how modern procurement required faith sector agility. He thanked oversight bodies for their diligence. When the presenter asked him if he could assure the public that grants to charities were appropriately monitored, he replied that the public's trust was a sacrament. In the reception at Broadcasting House, a television showed Penn not sweating. Amrita Bose stood next to Hale and marched with a notebook and a microphone she would not use. "You see," she said softly, "he knows his nouns." Carr writes his liturgy. Hale said, "Wakefield blesses it." March said, "And Dean sings harmony. Dean will deny the complaint." Bose said, "She'll say someone spoofed her. She'll say she was in a meeting. She'll be right until she's not." March's phone vibrated with a clapperboard. "Here we go," she said. On the FT Live blog, a small square popped like a blister. Exclusive. Charity disbursals under scrutiny as councils receive NCA preservation orders. 2 paragraphs, no names, and 1 long, precise sentence that made lawyers tilt their heads. It was enough. The air changed. The phones changed. Somewhere, a comms officer earned their day. "Vale's calling everyone," Bose said, reading the room without looking at a screen. "Wakefield will post a photo with a child and a dog by noon. Let him," March said. "Dogs don't sign grant approvals." At 10:11, Kellan and Hale sat in a cafe near Fleet Street, where every table had overheard something libelous. March had escorted the arresting officers to an office where paperwork goes to beg for mercy. She had left them there and returned with a smile that meant oxygen. "For the next 3 hours," March said, "you are under my umbrella. After that, internal will lean and Penn will appear with a transparency report. Use the hours." "St. Bride's again?" Hale said. Kellan slid a napkin over crumbs and drew a triangle. Penn Wakefield. "Carr, we don't topple the triangle. We kick the leg that doesn't expect to kick." "Vale," Hale said. "He looks like a hinge. He's cheaper to break." "And Aegis Pastoral Holdings," Kellan added, "on the ledger and in CGF's vendor list. Security consultancy with no website and a director who doesn't Google. Where does Aegis live?" Hale had spent years reading addresses as if they were dialogue. "Leased units on a riverfront estate in Deptford," he said. "Industrial shells with no personality. Perfect place to staple a conscience to a wall." March's umbrella did not stretch to raids. "I can't task a search," she said, "but I cannot look in that direction from 11 to 12:30. That's very specific." Hale said, "I categorize my negligence," March said. "Be back with something that can convince a judge at 1. "Copy," Kellan said, standing. "We'll bring you a blade." Deptford's riverfront wore rust like jewelry. Unit B. 12 was a rectangle of metal-painted battleship gray, with a shutter door that had been lifted and lowered by men who didn't respect hinges. No sign, no intercom, just a number that cooled after doing its job. B12, Hale said, because the universe likes private jokes. He remembered the marginalia, St. Bride's ledger, convening nights, and wondered what else the cross-references had meant to Sarah Bourne when she'd written them. He wondered if she had ever written to herself to stay alive. Kellan's lockpick kit looked like a fountain pen that had gone to boot camp. She knelt, worked, listened, and the padlock stopped pretending. The shutter climbed with the complaint of old metal. Inside, Aegis Pastoral Holdings did not hold much. A desk with a monitor asleep. 2 industrial printers that could have handled security badges or confessors' secrets. A laminator the size of a coffin's lid. Shelves with boxes of blank ID cards, holographic overlays. Rolls of pastoral labels in clean font. On the back wall, a whiteboard with a flowchart that had turned into a family tree. "Paper Guns Factory," Hale said. Kellan moved with fast caution. Touch nothing heavy. Look for the light things. On a workbench, a sheet of labels listed council liaison, community pastor, approver, each with a QR code that pointed to a website that almost existed. Next to it, a half-assembled lanyard printed Hale and partners consulting with a blank space for a face. They built the company on Friday and printed the badges on Monday. Hale said, "By Tuesday, I'm a byline." A faint hum came from a server cube the size of a carry-on suitcase. Cables running to the monitor that refused to wake. Kellan crouched, lifted the phone panel, and found a hardware token in a cradle, small blue, labeled Shepherd in a careful hand. She didn't touch it. She touched the table. "We unplug nothing," she said. "We take the cradle. The token comes last." On the other side of the unit, a cage door marked archive held a row of metal boxes, like filing cabinets that had chosen minimalism. Each box wore a stenciled number: B11, B12, B13. Kellan tried B12. Locked. She tried her pen again. The door opened with a small bow. Inside B12, a shallow tray held 3 objects: a burner phone with a cracked screen, a USB drive and a red rubber sleeve, an ID card for Sarah Bourne, Statham & Rowe Consulting. Photo a year younger than the bridge. Beneath them, a folded paper like a prayer. Hale unfolded it. It was a printed email, ink slightly blurred, dated 3 months ago. From s.bourne@stathamrow.co.uk to deaner@borough.gov.uk. Subject: pastoral dispersals, urgent concerns. Counselor Dean: this isn't cowardice. It's record. The ledger will be left where your conscience usually sits. If you do nothing, I will die or vanish. If you do something, I will die or vanish more slowly. Either way, you will not be able to say you did not know. S.B. Kellan read it twice. Dean received this, and still raised her hand in conference room B. Hale said, "He pocketed the letter the way you pocket a blade." Kellan took photos with the old camera that never found a cloud. She bagged the USB. She bagged the phone. She wrote chain on a piece of tape and wrapped it around the bag like a secular superstition. A noise pressed into the room from outside, not loud, not close. A door somewhere else in the estate. A cough that meant presence. Kellan's head tilted a fraction. "We're not alone," she said. 2 minutes. She moved to the server cube. "Token now," she said, and lifted the Shepherd fob with a piece of acetate like it had plague. She slid it into a Faraday pouch and zipped it the way you zip a wound. The monitor woke without permission. The login screen did not ask for a password. It presented a message in a font with too much confidence. "Welcome, Vicar." A cursor blinked like a pulse. Then the screen went black. The lid of the server cube sighed as hidden fans spooled. A smell of hot dust and halon pushed at the back of the throat. Kellan swore softly. "They saw us," she said. A click, the soft clang of a maglock engaging on the shutter. They were in a metal box that had decided to become a safe. "What is this?" Hale asked, voice steady because panic is contagious. "Fire suppression," Kellan said. "Modern, clean agent. Won't choke us, but it'll suffocate the server. They'd rather kill their copy than let us have it. Then we leave," Hale said. She ran to the side door they hadn't noticed. A staff exit to a corridor that smelled of tin and bad planning. "Locked." She picked. The pick slipped. 30 seconds, she said, not to him, to the idea of time. The halon hissed into the room with the politeness of a library telling you it's closing. The printer's status lights died. The laminator gave up hope. On the whiteboard, condensation made the arrows look like they were melting. Hale slung the bag tighter, the ledger a weight that believed in gravity. Kellan got the lock to commit to a mistake and dragged the side door open with a sound that filed itself under expense. They moved down the corridor into light thin as apology. Behind them, Aegis Pastoral Holdings became a husk. Outside, the estate had decided to notice them. A man in a fleece with a clipboard, a property manager cast as heavy, looked up from a conversation with 2 workmen and saw the bag, saw the faces, saw the choice to be brave or to do his job. "Oi," he said, and that was bravery. Kellan lifted a palm. "Police," she said, voice flat, badge gone but tone still legal. "Health and safety." "We had a system purge," Hale added, "because lies go down easier with true words attached. You'll have a fire crew and a complaint by noon." The man's eyes jumped from their mouths to their hands. He decided to be alive. They left on foot, walked past a mural that had learned to give up, and turned onto the main road where traffic forgives everything if you keep moving. 2 streets on, Kellan stopped under a CCTV camera that loved angles and looked up at it the way someone looks at a teacher. "Smile," she said. "He is." "Car?" Hale asked. "Car," she said. "He let us find B12. He wanted us to take Shepard because Shepard is a trackable gift. Then we don't turn it on, Hale said. We don't even look at it, Kellan said, patting the Faraday pouch as if it were a sleeping animal. Her phone, a Third Life handset with a cracked corner, vibrated. March, a lemon emoji, then text. Vale's counsel filing for injunction. Penn's office denying a prover alias exists. Dean issuing statement about smear tactics. Wakefield tweeting photo with a Labrador named Mercy. Need a page that bleeds. 12:50. Kellan typed back. We have Aegis. We have B. 12. We have S. Bourne's email to Dean. Providence Inside Unit. Bring boilerplate for chain. Also, device labeled Shepard. March. Do not move the device. Come to me. Now. Now. Hale asked. Now, Kellan said, but with detours. They didn't go straight. They took the city in zigzags, paying a toll of minutes at every corner. At Southwark, Kellan ducked him into a shop that sold printer ink and folk remedies, bought a roll of brown paper and parcel tape, and wrapped the ledger again until it looked like something that didn't want to be seen. Paper is a disguise, she said. Let it be one. At Burrow, they crossed with a crowd that could have been extras in a realistic film about people. Hale caught his face in a window and saw a man who had slept near the idea of sleep and never met it fully. He liked that man more than the one who had believed audits could save a city. At Embankment, the river had brightened. The sky had given up and became day. March waited in a cafe that had learned to clean quickly. She sat with her back to a wall and a view of a door because some people bring their own furniture. Give me Bourne's email. She said, no hello, and Kellan did. March read it like a surgeon reads a scan. And the USB, March added, will image it. If it gives me a file system, I'll buy the drive a drink. The Shepard token? Kellan asked. Stays dead, March said. If it chirps on a network, Carr hears it and gets religion. Hale put the Aegis photos on the table. Labels, lanyards, the whiteboard. March's face softened briefly in a way faces do when data becomes story. This is a blade, she said. Thank you. You only thank people when their name will appear in a memo, Kellan said. Noted, March said, and the joke made them tired friends for a moment. March looked at Hale. And you, she said, you've been arrested and unarrested in the morning, carried a book that could set us on fire and haven't tweeted. May I keep you? I'd like to be returned in similar condition, Hale said. March's phone vibrated again. She looked. She swore without moving her mouth. What? Kellan asked. Dean just called a press point for noon outside the Civic Center. March said, smears, politically motivated attacks, weaponized paperwork. She will bring tears to the edge of her voice, and a file she claims to have lodged with police. If a camera asks about St. Bride's, she will laugh. Let her, Kellan said. We bring Vale. Vale is hiding, March said. Hiding men make phone calls. If you can get me a recording of him talking like a man who likes ladders, I can climb a judge. How? Hale asked. A weak link always is a favorite bar, Kellan said. And Vale doesn't drink alone. He drinks where the room will see him being pious. The Swan at Bankside, March said, too quickly for guesswork. Fundraisers. Photo backdrops. Bad fish pie. Kellan stood. We'll be back before Dean finishes her second sentence. March slid them a folded document, like a blade wrapped in cloth. If anyone tries to arrest you again, she said, show them this. It doesn't prevent stupidity. It delays it. What is it? Hale asked. A letter of production, March said, addressed to whomever you need it to be. It asks them to give me what you just asked them for. Beautiful bureaucracy, Kellan said. The only kind I collect, March said. The Swan was already in rehearsal for theater. A fundraiser board in the foyer advertised community partners' night with a photo of Wakefield smiling like a benefactor who had recently remembered his wallet. Peter Vale sat at a corner table with a man whose suit had done too much work. Head of operations. CGF by hair and posture, if not by badge. Vale's knuckles rubbed his thumb. His whine was white and unthreatening. Kellan slid into Barr's shadow beside a radiator that needed to be bled and placed a small recording device on the lower lip of the paneling. Hale ordered water and found a column to lean on that didn't know it was a blind. They didn't need to get close. People who believe in their virtue speak louder than those who don't. I told him the tapes were on a lorry, Vale was saying, thin voice taut. By this afternoon they'll be in storage at Stoke Newington, and it'll take them a month to find which box. And if they bring March, the other man asked, name never used. Then we cry. Vale said, managing a laugh that wanted to be a cough. We say we did not understand, and that we are sorry. We say Wakefield is on a plane feeding orphans. And Penn is... Penn, Vale said, vague as a prayer. He'll weather it. He always weathers. But Carr, he stopped, the way men stop when they feel a shadow pass across a hill they hadn't seen. Carr doesn't weather, he said more softly. Carr hunts. Kellan and Hale exchanged a glance and saw the same lesson. They didn't stay to eat. They left through the side door because doors are made for sides. Kellan pocketed the recorder without looking at it, because sometimes you love a thing more if you don't. March. Hale asked. She gets Vale. She gets an injunction at 1, Kellan said. She puts his voice in a judge's ear, and the judge asks a clerk to find a bigger pen. And Dean. She cries, Kellan said. And then she finds a lawyer who will teach her to be specific. The city pressed noon upon them. Sirens annotated sentences. A pigeon landed on a sign that forbade pigeons. London did his impression of virtue, and everyone clapped. At 12:31, March texted a clapperboard and then words. Judge granted extended preservation plus limited search at CGF. Vale sweating on a transcript. Dean pulled her presser after 3 questions. Penn issued statement about cooperation. Wakefield posted Labrador again. Good, Kellan said. Then we have an hour where the triangle is busy. Busy triangle stabbed themselves, Hale said. They reached March's office at 12:49 and placed on her table what the morning had produced. The B, 12 tray items, the Shepherd token dead inside its pouch, the Vale recording, the Aegis photos, and the Bourne email to Dean. March stacked them the way one stacks cards in a game designed for people who like to lose slowly. I can get a search at Aegis for tomorrow, she said. Today they'll have Smoke and Hale on. But the B, 12 contents are ours now. Chain log at 12:52. If anyone asks where you got it, I say off a truck. If anyone asks why the truck was driving through a storage unit, I say London roads are confusing. And Bourne, Hale asked, we have her ID. We have a phone. We have an email that reads like a last sacrament. March looked at him and allowed something like kindness. You keep her alive by making her inconvenient, she said. I will put her name on 3 internal lists that contradict each other. Nobody kills a person the bureaucracy might need. Kellan's phone trembled on the table. An unknown number, then a message without words. An image. A CCTV still of the Aegis unit. Time stamped 30 minutes in the future. 2 figures in the frame. Hale and Kellan. Bags on shoulders. Faces lifted like people who've seen something worth recording. The caption overlaid in that clean, confident font. Pastoral. Welcome to the parish. Hale felt his stomach write something in a language that doesn't translate. He's ahead of us, he said. Or we're behind a clock he set. Kellan's mouth flattened. We don't go back to Deptford, she said. We go forward to St. Bride's. Another convening? March asked. Another basement, Kellan said. But not for liturgy. For storage. The marginalia in the ledger said St. Bride's Ledger, singular. It wasn't just a calendar. It was a second book. March didn't say too risky or impossible, because she had already learned how those words function around them. She wrote St. Bride's, archive on her pad, and underlined archive twice. This afternoon, she said, I will feed a judge enough truth to make him generous by morning. Tonight, you will commit a minor sin, and bring me something that will make him greedy. She slid the shepherd pouch back across the table. And keep this in the dark, she said. Whatever it opens will shut faster if it sees daylight. Kellan stood. Hale stood. The room shrank and then returned to size. "Paper guns," March said, glancing at the ledger wrapped in brown. "You've been shot at all morning." "We've learned to aim back," Kellan said. "And you'll need a blade," March added. Kellan tapped the parcel twice, as if it had a heartbeat. "We're going to steal a Bible from a church," she said. "One written in numbers." They left, the door side. The city rolled into the afternoon like a coin. On the pavement, Hale looked up at the sky that decided to be one color and said, "Because speaking makes cowardice smaller. If she's still alive, I'll find her." Kellan didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both heard the same thing, a clock beginning to ring, somewhere below ground, and under the ring, the soft rustle of paper. Chapter 7. The Numbers Bible. The parcel looked like anything and weighed like judgment. Hale turned it over on the cafe table. Brown paper, parcel tape, corners rounded by handling, and felt again the old, priestly respect for books. Across from him, Kellan drank coffee the color of grudges and watched the door the way a mathematician watches an error. "Last chance to be boring," she said. "We hand the ledger to March and write each other consolatory notes once a year." "We did boring," Hale said. "It turned into a company with my name on it." She nodded once, as if honoring a dead thing. "Then we do the opposite." They left the parcel under the careful chaos of a free paper rack, sealed in a plastic sleeve, label found. To be claimed in handwriting that resembled none of theirs. From outside, it became debris. From inside, it was still a book that could tip the city. Kellan took a photo from 3 angles, texted it to March with a caption. "Dead drop a retrieval if we don't return by 1 o'clock. March replied with a lemon emoji, then, "Understood. I'll have a courier who doesn't ask questions." They didn't keep looking at the door, and the door didn't reward them by opening. St. Bride's didn't need to pretend at being a refuge. Fleet Street had once shaken ink from its shoulders here and called it news. The church had kept its spire like a needle threading time. At dusk, the stone seemed to exhale forgiveness. Hale didn't ask whether it forgave trespass. "Basement," Kellan said, not lowering her voice because lowering voices makes them interesting. "We don't ask for a tour. We ask for a person." The person was a woman, in a black cardigan with the expression of someone who had been given the keys to a cupboard and liked the responsibility. Verger, her badge said. Mrs. Kendall, her face suggested. "We like to see the archive room," Kellan said, adopting the tone she used at police cordons when smaller men told her what a process was. "Diocesan audit. We called ahead." Mrs. Kendall put politeness on like a shawl. "I'm afraid I didn't receive a note." "Not your fault," Kellan said. "It's never the right inbox." She produced a folder with a letterhead that could have belonged to the diocese or to a man with a printer and a sense of typefaces. At the bottom, it bore a typed name, Archivist Bennett. Mrs. Kendall's eyes softened into the safety of bureaucracy. "Oh, Mr. Bennett. Very good. It's down these stairs, but we do have a congregation in the nave. I'll need to ask you to be silent," Hale said. "I can do that." The stairs were old enough to have developed memory. The crypt smelled of cold stone, old air, and the leftover fragrance of other people's reverence. A light flicked on with the hesitance of a man asked to swear. Mrs. Kendall unlocked a metal door with a keyring that made a noise like forgiveness. "Registers on the left," she said. "Parish documents by decade. Anything you move, put back." We've had trouble with enthusiastic historians. "We're enthusiastic only on paper," Kellan said, and they went in. The room was smaller than it wanted to be, shelving on 3 sides. A dehumidifier humming the soup out of the air. Archive boxes in gray and brown with labels that meant a lot to the people who wrote them. Baptisms 1971 to 1980. Marriages 1950 to 1960. Burials 1945 to 1955. Nothing that read convenings or pastoral or ledger we shouldn't have. Hale ran his fingers across the spine of a bound register. "The way you learn to greet a dog you don't know." "The marginal note," he said. "St. Bride's ledger. Convening nights. If you promised me a metaphor, I'd be grateful." "Look for lies dressed as categories," Kellan said, Scanning labels like a skeptic reading a horoscope. We're not in the catalog world. We're in the world of miscellany. She found it by temperament and accident. A box labeled MISC. Parish admin with a smaller label pasted over first. The new label read sundries in a hand that had not wanted commit. Inside, cords for audio equipment, an old notice for a cake sale, a tin of drawing pins, a cloth bag embroidered with an altered guild's initials. Beneath the bag, a narrow book the size of a long envelope. Cloth bound like a register taught to be ashamed. No title on the spine. The ribbon, darkened by oils of fingers. Kellan set it on the table. Hale straightened before touching it. He found his hands were clean enough. The cover yielded like a conjurer's trick. Inside, rule columns as in any ledger. Dates in a neat hand, locations in a less neat one. Headings at the top of each page in small capitals, as if the writer feared their own nouns. Convenings, St. Bride / All Souls / St. Luke's. Attendees, invited / present / absent. Offerings, received / dispersed / acknowledged. Benedictions, approved / pending. Numbers, Hale said, not trusting his voice with anything more precise. Liturgy, Kellan said. They turned pages with deliberate care. Names that belonged on policy panels and foundation boards appeared in a script that had outlived typewriters. Wakefield's Vale, there, in loops that suggested haste. Counselor Dean, initials in a side column, next to present, excused early. A page where pen was not written at all, but a small was drawn in the margin and at the bottom of the page, a note in a different hand. Approver Sigvien, pen, 0 for log with minutes, see sealed. Sealed, Hale said. Where? Kellan scanned the room as if the answer might be hovering. If you have a ledger you shouldn't. You don't leave it alone, she said. You pair it with its proof, and you put the proof where only the faithful think to look. They worked quickly, cataloging by camera and by eye. 10 pages in, Hale found an entry that made the room shiver. Date, 3 months ago. Convening, St. Bride's basement. Attendees, pen, Wakefield by Vale, Dean Liaison Vicar. Others, offerings, CGF £480,000, Youth Resilient Hubs, disperse of Fallow Fields Whitey, Phoenix Coachline CIC, Aegis Pastoral Holdings. Benedictions, approved, countersigned liaison. Minutes, S. Bourne, scribe, admitted ad hoc. Note, scribe to be relieved before next convening. Sealed, minutes plus approver tokens, vestry safe. He pointed without touching. Kellan leaned low, as if the words might spook. Vestry safe, she said. Not here, other side of the crypt. Keys. Mrs. Kendall. Hale said, and the name felt as much like a risk as any door. They closed the book, showed nothing in their faces, left the archive room in the cool air and stone that had learned to listen. In the corridor, Mrs. Kendall was arranging a stack of folded tables with the ritual efficiency of people who make churches work. Apologies, Kellan said, with that specific police smile that announces a favor you're not meant to grant. Archivist Bennett asked that we verify the vestry safe inventory. We'd hate to call him back over nothing. Mrs. Kendall's mouth did a small, sympathetic war with itself. Mr. Bennett can be particular, she conceded. Well, if you're only verifying, do you have the slip? Kellan showed her a form from a folder that was not a form but had the swagger of one. Mrs. Kendall squinted, found enough bureaucracy to protect her soul, and led them through to the vestry. The safe had opinions. Old steel, new lock. Mrs. Kendall worked the combination with the absorbed attention of a musician tuning. The door sighed open with an air of having seen more significant events than this. Inside, a stack of envelopes bound with rubber band, a tray of spare chalice screws, a cloth pouch sealed with red wax. Kendall frowned. We don't often seal things, she said, almost to herself. That would have been Father James's doing. He's enthusiastic. Kellan held out a hand. We'll just check the label. The wax had been impressed with a stamp that read SB in careful serif. The label tied to the wax. Minutes convening. St. Bride's, see Ledger. A second tag, smaller, in the same hand. Approver tokens. Tokens? Hale said lightly. Like bingo. Oh, those little fobs of men bring that make the projector behave, Mrs. Kendall said, relieved to have a harmless explanation. I don't like technology in churches. Kellan smiled a public smile. We'll sign the inventory and be out of your way. Under the table of the vestry, a phone vibrated faintly against wood. None of them were holding it. The sound made a small river in Hale's spine. Mrs. Kendall didn't hear. Do you need the register book as well? She asked. We keep it in miscellany. Father James says the diocesan auditors like a neat table. No. Kellan and Hale said together, gentle, and Mrs. Kendall accepted that she had done her duty. Back in the corridor, Kellan breathed in through her nose and let it out without a sound. Car, she said, as if the name were a weather report, or someone who thinks it's witty to be him. Phone in the vestry? Hale asked. He left it for us, she said, or for sound. They didn't discuss theft in a church. They performed due process according to their own liturgy. Kellan took 2 photos of the sealed pouch in one of the safe interior. Hale signed a verification slip with a hand that could have belonged to a vicar writing a condolence. Mrs. Kendall relocked the door. Keys returned to keyring. Chain back into loop. Whirled almost as it had been. At the top of the stairs, Kellan stopped in the shadow of the nave and looked at the handful of congregants sitting beneath the spire. An old man, a young mother, a woman wearing headphones, a tourist with pocketed hands. Up the aisle, a man in a navy coat stood not quite still and faced the altar way a chess player faces the board after deciding on a bad opening. Wakefield, Hale murmured. No, Kellan said. Wrong posture. That's Vale. He turned his head slightly, and a familiar rub of knuckle on thumb confirmed what nerves suspected. He looked like a man who thought he had done a small good thing, and was waiting to be praised or forgiven. The line between the two was a hair. Kellan didn't change route, speed, or face. She walked him as if he were furniture. At the door, she asked Mrs. Kendall whether the vestry keys could be signed out for an hour. Mrs. Kendall said of course if documentation existed. Kellan said it always does. Outside, Fleet Street rehearsed its traffic. Hale didn't exhale until tourist voices replaced stones. That pouch, he said. You felt it. I felt a fight, Kellan said. We take it, and Carr asks the church to complain, and we're thieves. We leave it, and it evaporates at midnight after men whisper benedictions. We make a third option, which is, we have a vicar, she said. We make a verger. The verger in their version was Mr. Hobb, a man in his 60s who may once have been a locksmith and had decided, swiftly, not to remember. He kept a shop in a side street that smelled of metal and lavender. He sold paperclips one at a time to people who thought paper was an enemy and sharpened scissors with parental care. We need a seal, Kellan told him. Not a new one, a versatile imitation, something that will hold red wax and carry SB with enough doubt built in. Initials are vanity, Mr. Hobbs said, entering, as people like him do, halfway through a conversation they've been having with the world for years. Vanity is easy. Serif. Serif, Hale said, conservative and learned. Mr. Hobbs selected a stamp blank from a drawer and engraved with a tool that made noise like rain. He bordered the letters with a fine line. He polished with a cloth that had known better fabrics. He asked for cash and a promise to remember his shop when the city decided to get rid of it. They returned to St. Bride's at closing, walking through a door that noticed him and decided it had seen worse. Even Song had emptied the nave. Mrs. Kendall was gone. A younger verger replaced her, a man whose hair had not yet learned to settle. He was happy to be relieved early, happier when an official-looking form told him he had been relieved. An hour, Kellan told Hale when the crypt swallowed them. No heroics. Quiet crimes only. The safe opened under her hands like a practice kiss. She lifted the sealed pouch with the respect one gives both bombs and books. She warmed the wax seal with the breath of a kettle spout, near, not touching, until the bond loosened. She pried gently with a blade, so then it apologized for existing. Inside, a stack of minutes written in tight, disciplined script. No name spelled in full, L.D. Vicar, but dates that could be mapped to the ledger's entries. And beneath the minutes, a small box of tokens. Hardware fobs like the one from Aegis, each labeled in that clean, confident font. Shepherd, Deacon, Sacristan. Levels, Hale said softly. Roles. 1 for approver, Kellan said. 1 for dispersal, 1 for entry. They gave their corruption to the church's architecture. She photographed the first 3 sheets, then the one marked convening. Saint Bride's Scribe. Her camera hummed the truth into plastic. Hale picked up a token with 2 fingers. The label read Deacon in small capitals. He put into the Faraday pouch with Shepherd and felt like a man collecting chess pieces in a game that had chosen him. The crypt door clicked. Not loud, not threatening. Just an ordinary sound of someone obeying their job. Kellan looked up, face smooth. She resealed the pouch with new wax and Mr. Hobbs' stamp. Side by side, the old seal and the new smile looked like cousins who had been told different stories about their childhood. She placed the pouch back in the tray with the minutes and tokens. She closed the safe. She turned the combination by feel, without looking, and the dial agreed. Footsteps in the corridor, the kind that keep to the center of the stones. A voice, not car, not veil, a voice that measured syllables the way donation checks are counted. Father James, probably the enthusiastic one. Everything all right down there, it called cheerfully. We're closing to the public. Kellan opened the door before he could appear and fill the doorway like a problem. Archivist Bennett's people, she said, smiling like a tired competence. Apologies. We took longer than we planned. Miscellany is messy. Father James looked like a man in a catalog who had chosen church rather than law at the last minute. He glanced at the clipboard Kellan carried, saw words he didn't want to parse, and decided to be hospitable. Not to worry, he said. We like audits. They make us feel seen. That's a first, Hale murmured. Father James's eyes snagged on the edge of something in the curve of Kellan's pocket, a corner of Mr. Hobbs' stamp poking up like a stray thought. He didn't know what he was seeing. He knew enough to smile. Do come again, he said. But warn Mrs. Kendall. She'll bake if you tell her in time. They left with empty hands and a full recorder. The church let them go in the way only churches can, without taking offense at what had just been done to them. Outside, London had kept its compact with time. Night showed its work in windows. Fleet Street wore itself like a coat. Minutes, Kellan said. Tokens. A ledger that tells us where the paper lies. We have a blade. Enough for a judge? Hale asked. Enough for a judge who likes to be first, she said. March will feed him this with breakfast. Her phone buzzed from the inside of her coat, the way warnings do. Unknown number, then not unknown. Sarah, Eliza, call me. It's about a client. S. She stared at the name as if it might rearrange itself into someone else. The timeline in Hale's had misfired, and then clicked. You all right? He asked. Kellan locked the phone with the speed of someone who understands ambush. Wrong, S, she said. Right initial. Before he could ask, his own phone, burner 3, vibrated. No number, no label. He answered, because that is what curious men do after they have promised themselves they'll stop. Breathing. Then a voice that might have been a person or a recorder's old memory. Don't come home, it whispered. They move your door. Born. Hale said, the name leaving his mouth without permission. Silence. Then a click that sounded like a decision. He stared at the screen, as if it might confess. Kellan didn't ask for the phone. She asked for the sentence. He gave it. Moved your door, she repeated. He has humor. Or geography, Hale said. They walked to the corner, without saying whose name the church had written where. At the curb. A car sat with its engine off and its windows fogged from human weather. As they passed, the driver wiped the inside of the glass with his sleeve to see them better. The gesture was not theatrical. It was work. Vale's men, Kellan said without moving her lips. Or Carr's idea of Vale's men. Where's home, then? Hale asked the knight. She pointed past him, not towards his flat, but towards a river. Where water is between you and doors, she said. And where paper can immediately be brought to bear. The ledger, he began, is a parcel waiting politely for March, she finished. "We do not carry it to bed." He had the oddest impulse to laugh. "Sleep?" he said, as if it were a thing you could schedule. 2 hours, Kellan said. "Then we wake a judge." They crossed Fleet Street, as if it were theirs. In a line of stalls by the curb, a man who sold newspapers even now arranged headlines under a clip to stop the wind lifting them into the river. The top line read, "Charity under scrutiny." The subhead, smaller and keener, "Council payments questioned." They didn't buy one. They didn't need to. A city tells you its story whether you pay for it or not. They slept in a cabin on a barge that rented itself to people who liked to pretend the river was a road. The owner knew Kellan as the woman who tipped properly. He asked no questions, added no names or receipts, and produced 2 keys that had never introduced themselves. Movement made the boat say what boats say. Fleet Street and its spire receded into black shapes. Hale lay on a narrow bed that remembered wider backs and listened to water talk to stone, and in that talk he thought he heard words. He slept and woke with the same thought. Sarah Bourne had written Espion to wax as if she believed in the rituals of secretaries. He wondered if she had believed herself alive while writing. He wondered who had taught her to sign like that. He rose into the thin daylight before day. Kellan was already up at the small table, drawing lines on a pad with the half-sharp insistence of someone who intends to persuade a judge. "Map," she said without preface. "Ledger page to minutes to tokens to CGF dispersals to Aegis manufacturing. Chain you can carry without resorting to metaphor." He sat opposite. He took a pen. He drew. It felt like auditing. It felt like war. By the time the boat knocked politely against its mooring to announce morning, they had a packet. Copies, dates, an affidavit of sorts in Kellan's schoolteacher hand. At the top, she had written for March a line that would make a judge sit up. These minutes and tokens were preserved under ecclesiastical seal within a vestry safe at St. Bride's and cross-reference ledger entries signed VN Pen 04, with CGF dispersals to contractors, including Aegis Pastoral Holdings, which appears to manufacture counterfeit authorization. "You make villains administrative," Hale said, admiring. "They made themselves administrative," Kellan said. "I just write neat." Her phone rattled with a message from March. "Judge hungry. Bring breakfast." "What counts as breakfast?" Hale asked. "Paper," Kellan said, and rolled the packet into a cylinder as if it might fit into a cannon. They met March under a sky that had decided on gray. Administrative justice was awake and grumpy. March wore the look of someone who has stared at an elevator with her will. She took the packet without flattery and flicked through each page with the appetite of a convert fed bread for a week and finally handed meat. "Tokens?" she asked. 2 fobs, Kellan said, putting the pouch on the table but not opening it. "Shepherd and Deacon." Faraday kept. "We don't chirp until a judge says chirp." "I like your liturgy," March said. She held up the minutes, 1 page at the marginal mark, and tapped it. "This, scribe be relieved, will make a decent person sweat." She looked at Hale. "Bourne will not be grateful when we find her." "I would settle for alive," he said. March tucked the packet into a file with the judge's name and a clip that frightened other documents into submission. 11, she said. "If I walk it into chambers with a Labrador tweet, I get nothing. If I walk it in with this, I get an order and an enemy. Either makes a day." Her phone buzzed. She checked it, and her mouth did not move. Penn had posted a clip from Radio 4. Wakefield had posted a child and a dog. Dean had posted a photo of a binder labeled transparency. "Paper guns," March said, half to herself. "We fire, they fire. Let's see whose paper is heavier." She stood. "And you," she said. Kellan and Hale looked at each other, found the same map, and spoke with one mouth. "Deptford burns. St. Bride sings. Vale drinks at the Swan. We take the minutes of the press if the judge hiccups." March nodded. "And if Carr phones?" "We let him talk and forget to record him," Kellan said. "Or we record him and forget we did." March grinned despite herself. "Don't come home," she said unexpectedly, as if repeating a liturgy she didn't believe. "They move your door." "Who told you that?" Hale asked. "You did?" March said. "Just now." They parted without touching. Behind them, the city began its habit of denying what it knows. On Fleet Street, St. Bride's spire cut the morning into slices. Inside a safe in a vestry, a pouch cooled under its new seal. In a gray unit by a river where rust negotiated with water, a server cube with no token to love itself cooled into sullen silence. In a file at the FT, Amrita Bose's notes grew a spine. In a charity office full of photos and slogans, Peter Vale rehearsed sincerity to a mirror and failed twice. In an office at Whitehall, Sir Alistair Penn looked out the window at a sky that didn't care and didn't sweat. And under the river where London kept its colder stories, something that weighed less than paper turned over and remembered a hand. Chapter 8. The Door They Moved. The judge wore the same blue tie as yesterday, as if justice required a uniform. At 11:06, he signed Order 42/25 with a pen that sounded like a door closing quietly on someone else's fingers. Eleanor March folded the order into a file heavy enough to bruise and stepped into the corridor with the look of a woman who had won a point but not the set. "Wider search," she said dry. "Full CGF, Aegis Paso Holdings, and a glance at Thomas, your flat. We need to get in before they do." "My flat has already been moved," Hale said. "Whatever's inside now was never mine." "Exactly," Kellan said. "If Carr dressed a scene around you, we photographed the stage directions, not the actors." March checked the time. "You've got 120 minutes before internal finds a pretext. Go in. Take only what you can't afford to lose. If you see a hidden camera, wave. I'll dirty the chain of custody so the smell reaches a judge." "And Bourne?" Hale asked. March, without gentleness. "You keep her alive by making her inconvenient. I'm putting her on 3 internal lists that contradict each other. No one kills what the bureaucracy might need." Hale Street had learned to pretend indifference. Same shutters, same man watering plants he didn't love, same letterbox acting like it was an ambush. But the door was new, darker wood, a polished brass eye, the number replaced by a small plaque that smiled like false teeth. "They literally moved it," Hale murmured. "Geometry is a crime." Kellan brushed her knuckles over frame, then between jamb and wall. "New screws," she said. "New camera." She pointed up. A smoked microdome hardly larger than a coin, sunk into the ceiling. Not building management. March arrived with 2 NCA officers and a forensic photographer who smelled faintly of glove powder. She showed the order to a first-floor tenant, who opened her door only far enough for her eyes to pass through. "3rd time this week," the woman said. "If they're filming a TV series, they should say so." Inside, Thomas Hale no longer existed. In his place, Hale and Partners Consulting his showroom. New desk, network printers, a panel that read vision, integrity governance in a font that hated the poor. Tidy cabling, a live router, a handful of lanyard badges in a bowl like complimentary mints. On the wall, a whiteboard calendar with this month's boxes filled by counterfeit calls. Stakeholder onboarding, pastoral review, dean/prep. "This is set design," Kellan said. "Still smells delivered." The photographer shot the room wide, then the tells. A stamp of dust misaligned on a frame edge. A fresh scuff on a multi-plug. The glossy line where a wardrobe had been nudged and air re-smoothed. Hale went straight to the skirting beneath the bookcase. 3 years ago, he'd wedged a sliver of copper there as a seal, a pencil line between board in case that, if broken, said someone has read your life. The line was broken twice and redrawn in a darker graphite. "They went in and redid my suspicion," he said quietly. In the new desk drawer, a pack of invoices with Hale and Partners letterhead, jobs that never happened, hours billed to real bodies, an IBAN that had never been his. Each invoice signed in a fountain pen pastiche of his handwriting. Perfect except for one detail. No one else would notice. Thomas never closed a crossbar on a 7. Here, every 7 wore a hat. "Paper guns," he said. "Self-loading." "We take only the beams," Kellan said. "Router, print logs, the badge bundle, and the letterbox." In the letterbox, beneath 2 flyers and a ticket for a car he didn't own, a brown envelope. Registry section. Notice, Inside, a page where Pastoral appeared as both ministerial masthead and final line. Mr. Hale is invited to attend at 9 o'clock tomorrow to clarify matters. Digitally signed by a civil servant March recognized. She wrote the name into her notebook the way you write a surgeon's name. They'll stage with this, she said. We beat them by an hour. The bedroom had been remade as a catalog, on a nightstand. Something that had never been his. A silver bracelet with a blue cameo, small enough to catch the light like a breath. Hale didn't touch it. Kellan gloved up, lifted the bracelet over a card. Not from this story, she said. From another story. But someone decided all stories look alike. Born, Hale said, and felt the surname do something to his ribs. It's hers. Or a forged signature, Kellan said. Photo, then bag. The photographer shot. The officer bagged. March checked her watch. 3 minutes, she said. Then we seal first. If Internal wants to deliver a skit, they'll do it in front of our stickers. They left numbered labels behind like stitch wounds. The ceiling dome kept minding their business. One more thing, Hale said, returning to the door. He popped the peephole from inside and, with a screwdriver, unthreaded the ring. Stuck behind it was cyanoacrylate gel, a micro SD the size of a fingernail. This one's mine, he said. Embedded 3 years ago when I was still the accountant who didn't break enough. Did they move it? No. No one checks where you expect. Kellan smiled for first time in hours. Then today we get a gift of our own. The kid at Phone Fix by Borough Market loved hardware with a devotion that deserved liturgy. No internet, Kellan said, setting down Sarah Bourne's trash Nokia and the micro SD. Air-gapped. We just need eyes. Physical recovery, the kid said. If the file system's toast, I'll image it. But the image doesn't leave this bench until you look happy. He was Emil. He obeyed difficulty alone. He slotted the SD, opened a program that didn't care to be liked, and waited. 2 minutes later, folders appeared with no poetry. Audio, notes. He double-clicked notes. A single audio file, dated 3 months ago. Name, Vestrianus beat at M4A. I'll monitor in cans. Emil said, doing what saints do, listening first. After 20 seconds, he lowered the volume and handed Thomas a pair of cracked ear cups. If it's your voice, he said, you're in the best kind of trouble. The voice was Sarah's. No theater, just measured oxygen. If I don't come back, there's a second book. Kept in the vestry, St. Bride's, under seal. I pressed SB into the wax the way you press a handkerchief on a wound. Inside are minutes and tokens. You don't need a judge. You need a verger, someone who believes in keys. Thomas, if you're listening, it means you found the peephole. Smile. They know you. They've already printed a life for you. Don't give it to them. Paper rustled. A whisper. Wednesday, 22:30. The same night they'd first been under the church. Kellan removed the can slowly, as if that made less noise. She wrote our map before we did. She understood the only place power doesn't look as routine, Hale said. To Emil, what do I owe you for telling us who we are? Emil shrugged. A story when it's over. And a like for my channel. They left a forensic copy on Emil's thumb drive and a thank you insufficient to the act. Kellan's phone buzzed. No caller ID. She answered with a neutral voice reserved for mirrors. Mr. Hale, Victor Carr said, as if correcting the record, I hear you found the bracelet. Touching your fondness for souvenirs. You like gifts, Hale said. We got one, too, a hungry judge. Judges eat what they're served, Carr said. Today's menu is rhetoric. Come to the Wren at 13:30. Maintenance room, level -1. Bring the girls' recording. I'll give you something you call hope. And if we don't, then I will go to Hope and explain that you refused her, Carr said, and hung up with sacristy politeness. Kellan didn't list reasons it was a trap. She listed the traps one must walk into for a city to open drawers. The Wren is where the first man died, she said. Same map, same stairs. Except now we know where the missing camera is. And we know the maintenance room has a second access from the service shaft. Hale said, I surveyed it 10 years ago for a fire report. Never thought I'd need it. And yet, she said, the wren played noble, polished brass, carpets unafraid of soles, staff who called go sir. At reception, Kellan smiled like a person asking for one more hour of checkout. We have an appointment with maintenance, she said. Basement. Staff only, the receptionist said, because it was stitched into him. Then he recognized Kellan's timbre. The I am not asking a favor but a fact register, and chose efficiency over heroism. Lift at the end, he said. Passes. Oh, here. Level minus. One smelled of strong cleaner and pipes. The maintenance room was a rectangle full of air and expectations. No car. A chair in the middle, an open panel, and a locker with the uniform of people who make things happen without being photographed. Where? Hale said. Kellan did what police do when the world says empty. Listen to the room. Air humming, neon beating, a metallic tick behind the panel. Timer. Beneath, a fresh valve that didn't belong to the system. It sent Hale. He has a thing for clean agent dumps, she murmured. The timer read 3:29 and fell like a breath descending stairs. Kellan wrenched the valve with a spanner from the locker and dropped it into a mop bucket. The ticking continued. A second circuit. He wants to star the air, Hale said, staring up, like Deptford. Hale's phone vibrated. A message, no sender. Look up, Hale. They did. Taped above a vent tile, a small white envelope. Kellan climbed a crate, peeled the tile, took the envelope. Inside, a service key card and note. Shaft Dorby, don't be good. Dorby waited at the end of a corridor with compliant extinguishers. It opened onto a slit of service shaft, barely wide enough for patients. For meters, a concrete landing, another service door. Beyond, an unwindowed room, 2 shelves, a hotel safe sunk into the wall. The kind of black box that sees too much. The service card opened the safe. Inside, a cheap burner, a square notebook, and a photo printed in haste. Sarah born in profile, hair tied back, a cut above the brow, the look of someone who had slept in rooms where the ceiling talked. On the back, yesterday, Stoke Newington, Unit C. And don't let me become paper. Vale, Kellan said. The depot where he wanted to hide boxes. Hale opened the notebook. First page is full of IBANs, initials, dates. In the middle, a grid of 3 columns. A 10/offer/sign. A line written with equal haste and calm. Scribe alt. M woman, 30s. Below, small enough to sting. Kellan. They've seen you, Hale said, not letting it turn into a question. They've imagined me, Kellan said, knowing the difference. Carr writes endings for people who walk on stage. Somewhere above, the timer clicked. The air shift changed key. A dry hiss, then nothing. The panel had relatched itself. The shaft became a throat. Out now, she said. They backed down the concrete, shoulder to shoulder, and emerged into maintenance room as the neon made a zzzz like a wet insect. The main door shut. The service card opened it too, as if Carr had decided escaping was part of the lesson. In the -1 lobby, 2 men in suits too clean arrived with the casual choreography of well-rehearsed errors. One flashed security liaison. The other wore a face the city would remember. Mr. Hale? The badge said pleasantly. Technical issues. We'll escort you out. How courteous, Kellan said. They usually take the stairs. No one touched anyone. The lift rose with the slowness reserved for unwanted meetings. Receptionists stared past them like they were colonies of dust. They reached the street. Light made them real. Stoke Newington, Unit C. Hale said, looking at Sarah's photo. If that's hope, we take it before it becomes a press release. Quick stop at March 1st, Kellan said, staring up at camera that could parse intent. We dropped the notebook and Sarah's recording. And we asked for a car that doesn't exist. And if she says no, then we rent a catering van. Kellan said, the city opens every door for people carrying sandwiches. March was waiting with sleeves rolled. Sarah's photo lay on the table like a line between 2 futures. The shaft notebook sat among documents like a creature found in a park. Unit C, Stoke Newington, she said. I can cover you to the gate. Inside, it's you two and whoever chose a knife. Take a radio, not phones. And take this. She slid over a flat envelope with a stiff page. Section 49 notice. If you find an encrypted device in a living man, I can convince a judge to convince him. A living man, Hale repeated, as if the tongue needed proof. March looked at him with a shard of humanity that didn't end careers. I promised nothing, she said. I gave you a place to put it. On the way out, Kellan's phone buzzed. Amrita Bowes, Penn Live at 1300 hours. Wakefield Presser at 1430. Vale not answering. I owe you if you give me 2 lines that aren't a complaint. Kellan, St. Bride's. Vestry. Minutes. Tokens. Write numbers as liturgy and they'll know it's not PR. Bowes replied with a dot. Her way of saying received. Stoke knew it in stack storage like shoe boxes for a distracted giant. Unit C sat between B and D. Numbers and letters as number confessions. The gate open at a badge march had acquired 5 lives ago. Inside, smell of cardboard, diesel, glue. The far radio repeating a chorus it didn't deserve. The shutter on Unit C was down. Fresh paint on the lock. Kellan picked. The tongue yielded, but the door didn't move. Braced from within, Hale stepped back, checked the lateral fasteners. There's a catch here, he said. Inside. He rapped twice with his knuckles. He didn't know why. The corrugated steel answered. Kellan met his eyes. Neither wanted to name Morse out, loud in case it turned ritual. It's us, Kellan said softly toward the seam. We're the ones who won't let you become paper. Silence. Then a scrape, a latch, a meter of shutter rising and stopping like a breath held too long. Kellan slipped under. Hale followed. Dim inside. Shelves, cartons, the outline of a woman on a folding chair, hands clamped around a water bottle like a talisman. Sarah Bourne was lighter than the photo, more tired than the memory, more alive than both. I didn't have a name for you, she said. I tried several. None worked. Hale didn't move closer. Not yet. They saw you at the Wren, he said. Brought you here. They move me, she said. It's their favorite verb. Doors, names, responsibility. Kellan showed the Section 49 like talisman in a fairy tale. We need your words before they stop belonging to you, she said. And we need to leave before this unit becomes smoke. Sarah nodded, pointed at a low crate. Inside, wrapped in cloth, a black laptop with no logo, one edge scratched. B. 12 scraped by a paperclip. Beside it, a small tin with 3 tokens. Shepherd, deacon, sacristan. You won't like those, she said. They sing to whoever loved them. We keep them in silence, Kellan said, pocketing the fobs into Faraday sleeves. Can you walk? Sarah stood, trembled only where you couldn't see. Yes, she said, but I can't go back to being anyone's footnote. Outside engines. The kind of engine that sounds like a decision. Kellan lifted the shutter sliver. A white van had stopped by units A, E. 2 men who didn't wear their work stepped out with the gait of those who know how. The passenger spoke into a phone. His thumb spun a key fob. A stylized cross, ancestor of a logo. Car, Hale said, not because he saw him, but because the air had his taste. We don't use the front, Kellan said. Back. Sarah pointed to a service gully between C and D, a throat leading to a push-bar door. It's alarmed, she said, but the magnetic contact is tired. Hold it tight, and it'll believe we're still inside. Hale tore a strip of corrugate. Kellan rolled it and wedged it between the sensor tongues. The door accepted the lie and opened without complaint. Beyond, a path to a side lane. Right, a pedestrian gate. Left, a wall just low enough to educate an ankle. March. Kellan on the radio. North exit, on foot. 2 minutes. We have the fragile item. March. Received. Look left once and no sirens. They climbed back into the world with the agility of people who tried this as children. A delivery van pretended not to see them. Behind, the white van blinked hazards, a public signal for a private act. A man looked up as if weather could justify violence. The pedestrian gate admitted them with a resignation of useful things. March waited beyond in a Toyota. So anonymous it felt institutional. Sarah slid in without argument. Hale climbed behind, hand over nothing as if not to demand comfort. Where? March said, already moving. Somewhere the tokens won't talk, Kellan said, and where a judge can wash his conscience at 1400. I know the place, March said. It's called Rooms That Keep What Matters. Hale's phone buzzed. A new message in that clean font. Pastoral. The parish always opens ITS doors. Hale looked out. London flowed in different past the glass. Wheels worked. Sky worked. Inside, 3 people in a book of numbers translated into prayer. Sarah, he said quietly, the way you speak to living things. We've got you. She stared at the road as if it were a track before the train. Then she did something small, placed a blue cameo bracelet on the seat's fabric. That isn't mine, she said. It belongs to someone who thinks memories can be printed. Kellan smiled without teeth. Then we'll print theirs. March's safe room wasn't glamorous. 4 walls that knew nothing, a table, 2 chairs, a recorder that wouldn't betray anyone. Sarah spoke for 20 minutes with the economy of someone who doesn't want to say things twice. Convenings, minutes, tokens. Penn signing without being seen. Wakefield sending Vale. Dean arriving late, leaving early. Car neither arriving nor leaving being. Laptop B. 12 held cached MOUs. Attendee list with only initials. And a folder named Homily. Talking points, guidance, how to say scrutiny without saying scrutiny. They called me scribe once, she said. I wrote what they wanted. No names. All things. Then I started writing the margins. I resigned the next day. You didn't resign, Hale said. They dismissed you from your life. Sarah nodded. That's why I left the book where people still believe in paper. March stopped the recorder. Good, she said. And good meant now I can hurt the right way. I promise nothing, but I will take everything. Kellan stepped into the corridor to call Amrita Bose in code. Give me 2 lines, Bose said, near breathless. Right. Ecclesiastical tokens used as approval credentials. Physical ledger. Minutes kept under vestry seal. Names and margins. Then write that you can't write it, Kellan said. They'll read it better. Bose made a sound that might have been a laugh or the premise of one. Wakefield at 1430, she said. Hope he brought the dog for questions. Back inside, March was labeling the tokens like notes on a score. At 2, I want a judge with a warm pen, she said. At 2:30, I want Wakefield talking with a dry throat. At 3, I want to know if Penn sweats. Hale looked at Sarah. And you, he said, where does the city hide you until tomorrow? March pointed at the door. Where the city hides everyone. In a file. But one of mine. Paper guns, Hale said. This time we shoot, March said. With numbers. Kellan's phone buzzed once. An image. St. Bride's door, a bead of wax reflecting light. Caption in that confident font. Pastoral. Mass is over. Go in peace. He's trying to close the rite, Kellan said. Shame, March said, picking up the file. We got one last reading. They walked out into 2 o'clock light. A whole city was about to invent a new version of itself for the cameras. They had a book, 3 tokens, a notebook, and the voice of a woman who had pressed SB into red wax like a signature of resistance. This is the door they can't move, Hale said. So long as we stand here holding it, Kellan said. And the street listened, as always, indifferent, attentive. Chapter 9. Numbers as Liturgy. At 1421, the sky over Westminster looked like wet paper drying on a line. The city was holding its breath for a press conference it already knew how to interpret, and Thomas Hale had the sudden, childish urge to be anywhere except London. He stayed. Eleanor March texted a single line, Judge warming. Wakefield at 1430. Penn quiet. Dean rehearsed. Kellan stood with her back to a granite pillar outside the royal courts, eyes tracking reflections in a window instead of people themselves. We don't interrupt the show, she said. We count who claps. They moved the journalist down to the Civic Center where a lectern had been wheeled out and dressed in bureaucracy. Crest bunting, a cling of vinyl that said transparency in a font chosen by a committee. Cameras jostled. Microphones wore the badges of 10 networks and 1 student station. Thomas spotted Amrita Bose along the second row, a slim notepad, an expression of a person who had decided what sentence would live and what sentence would die. At 14:33, Lord Peter Wakefield arrived precisely 15 seconds after his comms director, who carried a bottle of water and an apology. Wakefield had the dog with him, a handsome Labrador with a photogenic sense of duty, because of course he did. The dog was named Mercy, a word that functioned equally well as brand and weapon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wakefield began, his voice like the first sip of something expensive. "The Common Good Foundation welcomes scrutiny, as it always has. Our mission is to bring resilience and compassion to communities abandoned by austerity and indifference. Today we answer questions." He took none for 2 minutes, the old trick of preemptive answers passing for candor. Then Bose's hand lifted and did not lower. "Amrita Bose," she said, "Financial Times. You've used ecclesiastical language before. Today I want to ask about literal ecclesiastical credentials. Are tokens labeled shepherd and deacon being used in your dispersal chain as approval artifacts? And are minutes of convenings at St. Bride's being kept under vestry seal?" Wakefield blinked once. The dog wagged, as if approval could be outsourced. "I don't speak to colorful metaphors," he said, smile calibrated. "We sign MOUs. We follow best practice. Do you follow it in basements at 2230? Bose asked, calm as rainfall. Behind Wakefield. Peter Vale materialized like a thought. He leaned towards his boss with a whisper whose urgency did not match the outward peace. Wakefield nodded, an older man absolving a younger one with a look. He returned to the microphone. "You will see, within hours, a full and independent audit of our dispersals," he said. "No secrets, no tokens, no basements." It should have landed. It didn't. The denial was too television neat for a day that had been reading parish registers. Kellan murmured without moving her lips. Look left. A man in a navy suit, deputy director from a cabinet office by haircut and hubris, was filming the crowd, not the lectern. He stopped briefly on Thomas, then Kellan, then on March at the rear. She was not supposed to be here. She was here anyway, talking into no one's ear as if the air were her clerk. Dean appeared next, flanked by 2 staffers in a folder that had rehearsed his entrance. "Smear tactics," she said into a different microphone, then corrected herself to the plural. "Smear campaigns. We will not be diverted from serving our communities." "Counselor," Bose said quick, "did you receive an email from Sarah Bourne 3 months ago referencing pastoral dispersals, urgent concerns, and promising to leave a ledger where your conscience usually sits?" Dean's smile faltered the width of a match. "I received many emails," she said. "We have procedures. Do your procedures involve signing minutes with an approver identity labeled VN Pen 04? Bose asked. Dean blinked that blank municipal blink that had carried careers further than truth. "That code means nothing to me," she said. She lifted the folder as if the folder could stand between her and weather. "I have here a transparency binder." "That's a prop," Kellan said softly. "Heavier than truth, lighter than evidence." March's message arrived with a thrum. "Order executed at CGF extension site." Vale's voice memo logged. "Judge will hear tokens at 15:15. "Then we don't make speeches," Kellan said. "We make the judge hungry." They slipped out before the questions turned into performance notes. On the pavement, Mercy the dog sniffed a lamppost named for a different century. Wakefield posed with a smile that told the world what good men look like. Vale rubbed his knuckle and tried to control how quickly sweat dries. "Follow," Thomas asked. "Not Wakefield," Kellan said. "Watch the hinge." Vale's hinge took him to a car park off Stanford Street, a concrete spiral where any conversation becomes whispered by force. He stood by his Audi and made phone calls with the posture of a man trying to inhabit another man's skin. Kellan and Thomas leaned in the shadow of a pillar 2 bays away, looking at their reflections in the windscreen of a car that would never cost what it wanted to. "I can't," Vale was saying. "They have a judge. March." "Yes." "The vestry." No, not the book. The minutes. Tokens. I know what it sounds like. He listened. He straightened. Then do it, he said. Aegis is offline. Use parish line. Yes. B. 12 is gone. No, I don't know where she is. Just don't say her name. He hung up and put both hands on the roof of the car as if it might steady him. Then he opened the boot. Inside, a portable shredder, a box of blank ID cards, a sealed envelope stamped with the word pastoral in that now familiar, eerily neutral font. Kellan breathed out like a diver. If we touch it here, we buy a story we can't afford. So we photograph, Thomas said. Light, angles, the cheap grace of metadata. They did. Frames that would later say the date, the time, the way Vale's knuckles whitened when he saw the camera, because he felt it rather than saw it. He closed the boot gently, as if quiet could rethread a plot. The Audi left a spiral and joined a line of small, legal lies. Kellan and Thomas watched it merge and pretended to be commuters. Parish line, Thomas said. He meant the LTE backdoor we saw on the Milton Keynes stack. Or the public-facing fiction of it, Kellan said. A service label you can say on a phone without triggering a filter. They crossed the river. The tide was on its way out, revealing the city's habit of leaving things near water and expecting the water to keep them. March called. 1515, Chambers 2. She said no hello. Judge wants something he can point to without bullet points. Bring him tokens and one sentence. What sentence? Kellan asked. That the same identity that signs national procurement approvals is used as a parish approver in a ledgers and minutes cycle run through a charity membrane. March said. You say it slowly, you hold up a fob, and you watch a man choose courage. In Chambers 2, the judge with the blue tie looked at the fobs, as if they were coins pressed on his palm by an unreliable monarch. March did the dance she knew. Narrow request, small enough to appear safe. Precise chain of custody. The word ecclesiastical used not as metaphor but as inventory. Kellan laid one token on a velvet board that was probably meant for jewelry and said the sentence without music. Order. The judge said, not because he enjoyed saying order, but because order gives a day its shape. He signed 4325, temporary seizure of digital credentials used to authorize public disbursals via charitable conduits, and then he added a free gift. An instruction to Metropolitan Police to assign a protective detail to the witness known to Chambers as SB. Bless him, March said under her breath, the nearest she would get to prayer. They left with a porter's nod. Outside, the air had warmed by a degree, and the city seemed less interested in their movements. That usually meant someone had made a decision elsewhere. Emerita Bowes' alert popped up a minute later. FT. Sources allege church seal minutes underpin charity dispersals. Tokens used as approvals. Officials deny theatrical claims. NCA seeks limited seizure orders. It wasn't a bomb. It didn't need to be. It moved the air enough that people would turn their heads and then keep looking tomorrow. What now? Thomas asked. Now we find where Carr keeps the bad weather, Kellan said. Aegis is ash. CGF is lit. Penn is insulated. Vale is a hinge. The only room we haven't broken is the one the parish doesn't put on the map. St. Luke's, Thomas said, thinking of the ledger pages. Convenings, St. Bride / All Souls / St. Luke's. Same hour, same handwriting. St. Luke's has a basement that pretends to be a community hall, Kellan said, and a vestry safe with an older lock than St. Bride's. If there's a duplicate minute book, it lives there. We're not stealing it. We're taking attendance. March texted, I can give you 30 minutes of polite confusion at St. Luke's from 2150. Housekeeping inspection. Do not get pious. Do get proof. They spent the late afternoon doing the work no thriller admits. Forms, copies, quiet phone calls to people who still trust Kellan enough to meet her in doorways. Thomas picked up a cheap paper diary and filled it with numbers that only he could read. He wrote small because the truth takes up less space than lies. At 2058, they sat on a bench just far enough from St. Luke's to watch without becoming scenery. A youth group smudged past in hoodies and good intentions. A caretaker smoked by the side door with the absent gusto of an ex-smoker. At 2146, March's borrowed housekeeping inspector knocked politely and asked for a mop that did not need asking for. At 21:52, the caretaker propped the vestry door with a bucket, because doors prefer to be open when people with clipboards are around. Kellan rose without looking like she was rising. Thomas followed, a notebook in his pocket and a sentence from a judge under his breath. They slipped into the vestry and found the safe where a safe should be. Old steel, newer combination. Kellan listened upside down with a stethoscope that had cost too much and paid for itself the first time a man with charm lied to it. It opened with a sigh more defeated than secure. Inside, petty cash ledger, a cloth pouch without wax. Too easy. She didn't reach. She watched the corners of the room, the way condensation writes its own minutes. She spotted the second door, narrow, painted the same color as denial. It led to a cupboard with 3 folding tables, 2 brass candlesticks, and a smaller safe sunk into a wall that had learned to accept secrets. This one opened to a key. They had no key. Kellan made 1 out of 2 picks in a memory of locks taught to her by an older detective who had left earlier than he should. The safe offered them a tray. In the tray, a lined book thinner than St. Bride's, a small tin with tokens, an envelope stamped pastoral with a clean, undramatic joy. Thomas didn't touch the envelope. Photos, he said. Then minutes. Then out. He photographed the tray, the hinge, the edge of the book, the reflection in the tin that showed the ceiling, and, faintly, Kellan's face. She lifted the book with her left hand and turned 1 page with her right. Dates, locations, attendees. The same small cross where pen should be. Vale's initials where Wakefield would be too vulnerable to stand. Dean's time-stamped exits. A line at the bottom of last week's page. Motion. Parish line sunset. New channel. Sacristy. Token rotation ordered shepherd deacon. Liaison to advise. That's the switch, Kellan whispered. They're killing the old back door and opening a new one. Tonight. And they rotate tokens, Thomas said. So our shepherd buys us 1 hour. Then it becomes folklore. Footsteps, not housekeeping. Shoes that assumed rooms would make space. Kellan closed the book, put it back into place, reseated the tray, and shut the safe with exactly the amount of noise a caretaker expects when nothing is happening. She nudged the smaller safe's faceplate a fraction off true. Anyone who opens it next will think the world misaligns on its own. They stepped into the vestry in time to see a silhouette cross the nave. A man who could be anyone until you watched the way other men shaped space around him. Carr, not a priest. The sort of layman a priest fears. He turned his head slightly, as if the air had coughed. Kellan and Thomas were not where his eyes expected them to be. He hesitated, almost smiled at the idea, and walked down the center aisle as if notes were printed on the floorboards. He passed them without seeing them because people who believe they own rooms forget to check corners. Outside, the night felt less certain of itself. The caretaker thanked housekeeping for a mop he already had. March texted a lemon emoji. Then Vale tried to file an injunction on minutes. Judge rolled his eyes on the record. Progress, Kellan said. Modest, bureaucratic, sufficient. They walked to Fleet Street because it had become their idea of a map. On the steps of St. Bride's, a woman sat with a violin case that had never seen a concert hall. She wasn't part of their story. She was part of the city's. Thomas felt a sudden ache for music that wasn't a code. He kept walking. At the corner, a black cab slowed with the instinct of drivers who have learned to read trouble from a block away. The driver leaned over. "You ain't safe," he said. "Not your faces." "We're not trying to be," Kellan said, and the driver huffed a laugh and rolled on. March called him into a doorway near Ludgate Hill. "If you're going to sleep," she said, "do it now. At 6, we pull the new channel out by the roots, or we admit we've been gardening around it." "Sacristy," Thomas said. "The new name." March nodded. "I've got a warrant the width of a prayer and twice as fragile. Tokens give us the right hole. Minutes give us the schedule. Bourne gives us reason. Penn gives us cover. He cannot afford to be seen as a man who fought a church order. And Wakefield?" Kellan asked. "We'll go for a walk with Mercy." March said. "He always does when the cameras leave. Someone there will speak to him. He will nod. He will accept God's will as read. They parted with the affection of people who could not safely display it. Thomas and Kellan took the south bank by habit. The river carried away the day's ash. On the footbridge, Thomas stopped and looked down. "When did you know?" he asked. "About what?" "That this wasn't going to be a ledger that stays on a desk," he said. "That there would be churches and tokens and dogs named for virtues." When they laminated the first page, Kellan said, "Lamination is for sacraments and training manuals. Only the devout and the incompetent laminate." He laughed to spite himself. The city answered with the siren of an ambulance pretending to be a lullaby. Kellan's burner vibrated once and died, as if embarrassed to have passed along the message. Pastoral, midnight mass, St. Luke's, bring the book. They looked at each other through the problem and found the same solution. "We don't bring it," Thomas said. "We bring silence," Kellan replied. They went back to the barge because the water made sense and doors do not. Thomas slept away hunted men's sleep. One eye open in a room without corners. Kellan wrote in a small notebook with a pencil, because pens are theatrical and pencils are forensic. At 4:11, a fox padded along the towpath and sat briefly as if it had been written to. At 5 o'clock, March texted, "Team in position for sacristy. Wait for the lights to flicker. When they do, the old parish line will die. The new one will scream. Then we collect." Thomas closed his eyes and saw the ledger as a different book, one that had begun to write them back. He sat up. He made coffee that tasted like rain. When dawn unbuttoned the sky, London looked like a place where numbers could be holy and holiness could be accounted for. He tightened his jacket. He checked the Faraday pouch. He nodded to a city that had not consented. "Let's move," Kellan said, and the day stood up with them. Chapter 10. Sacristy. The river decided the morning before anyone else did. It shrugged a low tide at the embankment stairs and left the city's mud to consider yesterday. Thomas Hale drained coffee that tasted like metal and rain and checked the Faraday pouch by touch. 2 tokens, shepherd and deacon, asleep. Across a narrow table, Kellan folded the judge's latest order into thirds with the slow care of a person who needs paper to behave. "March says the lights will flicker," she said. "Old channel dies, new one screams. When it screams, we put our ear on the right door. What if they move the door again? Then we move faster." They left the barge before 6. London was already playing at being useful. Vans reversing, street sweepers polishing yesterday's mistakes, cyclists with red eyes and good intentions. March texted a dot that meant here and a lemon that meant hurry. At administrative justice, she looked like a person whose entire morning had been a compromise that still counted as victory. "I've got warrants shaped like mercy and stubbornness," she said. "Limited seizure of network credentials known as sacristy, with on-site technical assistance from people who don't ask me to define vestry. You have 40 minutes before the cabinet office notices I misspelled something on purpose. And St. Luke's. Caretaker thinks he's hosting a boiler inspection at 6:30. March said, "My people will keep him interested in vows. You go where vows become theology." They moved as a small, quiet convoy, March in a plain car with 2 techs who wore rucksacks big enough to be hobbies. Kellan and Hale on foot for the last 2 blocks, because London relaxes around walkers. St. Luke sat hunched in its lot, Victorian brick, deciding not to be beautiful this morning. In the vestry corridor, a yellow wet floor sign guarded nothing in particular. The caretaker, bleary and well-meaning, held a door for March and launched into a monologue about air in the pipes. March nodded like a priest accepting confession and steered him toward the boiler. Kellan led Hale to the small safe in the cupboard they'd found the night before. The larger safe would have the decoy ledger and petty cash. This one was where someone had taught the church to keep the unsayable. She put her ear to the steel and listened, not to tumblers, but to the building. The faint, even heart of electricity, the whisper of the dehumidifier, the heavy breath of stone cooling. The lights flickered. "Parish line sunset," Kellan whispered. "Sacristy screaming." March's techs were already unpacking. One clipped a coupler to a junction box that looked like it belonged to lighting. The other eased a WAN antenna up to the ceiling line, eyes on a tablet that showed signal as falling rain. "Found it," he murmured. SSID Sacristy Management OOB. LTE fallback with private APN. Authentication via hardware fob. Traffic tunneling to Milton Keynes Farm. Politely, March said, we do everything politely. Kellan took the deacon fob from the pouch and did not hand it to him. No transmission, she said. We charm it without letting it sing. Local emulation only, the tech said, already spinning up a cage on his machine. We present the device with its own mirror. It thinks it spoke to home. Home hears nothing. He placed the fob on a coil like a magician's trick. The tablet blinked, sneered, yielded. Token accepted, he said. On his screen, a console that didn't bother to be pretty. Sacristy commands in plain text. Roles, sacristan entry, deacon dispersal, shepherd approver. A queue of scheduled authorizations flickered in and out as if shy. Take me to scheduled, Kellan said. Last 12 hours and next 12. The list populated. A cascade of transfers under 5,000 pounds. Youth hubs, resilience workshops, pastoral counseling. Each entry pointing to a vendor shell with the weary ingenuity of serial fraud. In the notes column, 2 words repeated with cruel brevity. Pen. Approver identity reused, the text said. Different signing context. Same key material. Whoever built the system didn't expect an audience. Pull a minimal slice. March said, metadata, not payload. We're not stealing. We're proving. Already doing it, the text said. Hands calm, eyes bright. Hash of the signing keys, token rotation log, and last-minute config change labeled midnight. Sunset Parish. Open sacristy. Kellan glanced at Hale. The rotation we saw in the St. Luke's minutes. Hale nodded. Shepherd demoted. Deacon doing the dirty work. And sacristan, the text said, tapping a line, acts like a door key. Without it, nothing opens. As if cued by his words, the corridor air tightened. A shadow displaced light outside the vestry door with the entitlement of someone who assumes rooms fall quiet when he arrives. Kellan stepped to the jam without making a sound and saw the back of a navy coat and the profile of a man who was not a priest and never would be. Car. He paused by the wet floor sign and tilted an inch, as if ensuring even the fake warning did its job. Then he walked on toward the nave as though he performed a blessing only he understood. March's other tech touched Kellan's sleeve, murmuring numbers. We've got 90 seconds until this channel queries home for a token audit. If home doesn't hear it, we want a plausible error. Give them a storm, Kellan said. The tech smiled, fed a short burst of packet loss into the emulation, and let the session write its own alibi. Poor basement coverage, retry scheduled, nothing to see here. Hale stood at the cupboard's threshold, listening to the church breathe through the wood. He thought of Sarah's voice on the bench at phone fix. You need a verger, someone who believes in keys. He thought of the old man in the nave last night, the headphones woman, the tourist who'd pocketed his hands. A city as congregation and a stolen liturgy. Got something else, the text said. A registry of roll holders. Hashes only. But the last rotation included 2 new deacons with registry tags, MacWK and ROSDN. Kellan didn't smile. Wakefield. Dean. They gave themselves church words so they could act like virtue. March checked the corridor and flexed the order in her pocket, the way some people worry rosary beads. Package what you can offend to a judge in 10 lines, not 10 pages, she said. And we walk. They did, courteous to floorboards and habit. In the vestry doorway, the caretaker saluted March as if she'd fixed the boiler personally. Outside, the morning had accepted its job. Kellan set a deliberate pace east. Hale beside her, March half a step behind. Techs fading into the city with their rucksacks of captured weather. By the time they reached the end of the street, March's phone hummed the judge's number. She stepped aside, listened, said, "Thank you, your lordship," in a tone that made formalities sound like steel warming. She returned with the face of a person who has been given tools. "Order 4425, she said. "Temporary gate on sacristy with mirrored capture. It keeps the door open for us while home believes it's stuck. Also, protective detail on Espia's teeth now." "Teeth?" Hale asked. "Officers who don't answer to the parish," March said. "I'm greedy today." They crossed Blackfriars and used the curve of the Thames to think. Amrita Bose called without asking permission. "I have 2 lines in the studio that want 6, she said. "Give me a sentence I can say at a kitchen table." Kellan didn't hesitate. "Charity money flowed through church name tokens that acted like passwords," she said. "Minutes in a church safe match signatures on public approvals. And the same code that blesses government contracts is blessing shell vendors. Put that on T." Bose inhaled a laugh. "Penn will call me irresponsible. Wakefield will call me cruel. Dean will call me political." "Say your parish," Kellan said, and ended the call. They reached March's office with the feeling that the city's eyes were on other screens. March spread the morning's harvest across a table. The token rotation log, the sacristy session note, the hashes that meant Penn's alias lived 2 lives, the photograph of Vale's boot inventory, the St. Luke's minute line, sacristy opens, tokens rotate. She arranged the pieces into a sequence a judge could read like a weather report. "We need one more thing," she said. "An address that isn't church. Sacristy's physical endpoint." Hale looked at the rotation log, the APN profile strings, the lazy regularity of a contractor's naming scheme. "Sacristy NKF 3, he read. "Milton Keynes Farm, Pod F3. The OOB we touched yesterday. But the mirror system expects reverence at the front door. We'll get more walking in as cleaners than as cops." "Cleaners," Kellan said. "Catering van." "I was not joking," she added, when March raised an eyebrow. "People who bring sandwiches are unfireable." March snorted the smallest laugh and signed a requisition that said equipment and meant costume. "You have 3 hours," she said. "After that, the Cabinet Office will have noticed that my typos come in pairs." They drove a white van with a magnetic placard that read Riverside Catering and smelled faintly of onions. Hale wore a cap with a logo that had ambitions. Kellan wore the bored face of a person who asks for loading docks and always gets them. At the Milton Keynes Farm entrance, a guard waved them through, because catering vans arrive when panic does. Inside the ring road, server buildings squatted like blank books. Pod F3 had a side door marked service and a clipboard hanging from a nail that asked for signatures no one read. The trick to invisibility is not to look like you belong. It's to look like you're leaving. They carried empty trays with the weary competence of people who ferry coffee to meetings that don't deserve it. In the service corridor, a patch of new drywall gave itself away with different paint and porous screws. Kellan lifted the edge with a palette knife from the glove box. A recessed cabinet blinked. Inside, a small LTE modem with a SIM tray labeled sacristy pen, a slender box with an SMA antenna, out-of-band controller, and a coil for inductive token reads. "Altar," Hale said. "Pulpit," Kellan corrected. "The sermons go out from here." She photographed everything. Labels, scratches, the installer's sticker half peeled. She pointed. The installer. On the modem's underside, a service sticker, Parish Tech Solutions, 2 phone numbers, and an address in an anonymous business park outside Watford. The sort of company that built quiet heresies on procurement frameworks and called it modernization. March's tech harvested the modem's config and left the device humming So Home Wouldn't Pray. He glanced up. "We can mirror this to ours for 6 hours without tripping counters," he said. "After that, the cage starts to look like a cage. We pick our hour. This afternoon, March said over the line, while Wakefield talks about compassion. They put the drywall back wrong on purpose. People trust mistakes more than polish. The van left by the way it came, anonymous as weather. By the time they were back on the M1, Hale's burner buzzed with a clean font that had begun to feel like a sermon. Pastoral. Confession accepted. Absolution within the hour. Translation, he asked. "Press conference," Kellan said. "Wakefield will light a candle for himself. He'll bring the dog." "Mercy," Kellan said, as brand. They reached the city at 1358. The square outside the Civic Center had learned where to put barriers. Wakefield appeared with Vale to his left and a parish priest to his right, a man with a collar and a worried kindness that had been recruited as set dressing. The Labrador sat and calibrated his tail. Microphones sprouted. The day leaned in. Wakefield spoke in modest paragraphs. The foundation welcomed oversight. Transparency was sacred. Compassion could withstand scrutiny. He announced an independent review chaired by a retired judge known for boring prose. He promised to publish findings. He said the word community until it lost surface tension. Bose asked her question without raising her voice. Lord Wakefield, can you confirm whether your operations use a token system named Sacristy to approve and move funds, and whether minutes of convenings were kept under vestry seals in churches across the city? Wakefield's smile held. Ms. Bose, he said, I don't accept the premise of your question. Do you accept the tokens? She said. He did not answer in words. He reached to scratch Mercy behind the ear, and in the millimeter of that gesture his eyes moved, to Vale, to the priest, to the building's second-floor windows where someone in a suit was making a too-wide phone call with his hand. It was enough. Cameras catch micro-prayers. Kellan breathed, tiny and satisfied. He's buying time. Then we spend it, Hale said. March texted. Gate open. Sacristy mirrored. If you have a head to cut, cut it now. They were already walking by the time the last journalist shouted something about Penn. The van took them northwest, past streets that wore yesterday's rain and today's dust, to the Watford Business Park, where Parish Tech Solutions rented a strip of brick and optimism. The office smelled of carpet glue and startup promises. A receptionist who doubled as a firewall looked up with wide competence. Catering, Kellan said, lifting a stainless tray. Client meeting? We. The receptionist began, then clocked the laminates and the inevitability and buzzed them through. In the back room, 3 engineers sat among coils labeled printers and familiar hardware, LTE modems, OB boxes, inductive token readers. On a whiteboard, elegant sketch diagrams showed shepherd-deacon-sacristan flows, as if innocence were a function of neat arrows. Morning, Kellan said, closing the door and showing March's order. We'll be polite. One engineer, the oldest, the sort who liked problems more than people, read the order twice and then sat heavily. We built what they asked for, he said. They said the words transparency and audit trail. They paid for redundancy. I put my kid's name on the warranty tickets. Kellan nodded. You made a pulpit, she said. Someone else preached. Can I, he started, then stopped himself. If we help you turn it off right, will the right people be angry? Yes, Kellan said. That's the point. They left with a box whose label read demo, and whose contents were not entirely demo. March's text drove it like medicine. Back at Administrative Justice, March opened a file the size of a thin book and found inside 3 lines she could take to a judge without apologizing. Physical endpoint, vendor invoices for sacristy installs, token rotation logs. For PM, she said, we asked for a search on Parish Tech, Aegis's ruins, and CGS upstairs office where Vale keeps the shredder. And we put SB under glass. Glass? Hale asked. A hospital that calls itself a hostel, March said. Name not on paper. Door no one moves. Kellan checked her watch. Then we use the hour. For what? March asked. Kellan looked at Hale. To give Carr a homily. They chose the place where sermons go to die. The undercroft of a car parked behind a deconsecrated chapel that had tried to be a gallery and then a wine bar and was now empty hope. Kellan texted the pastor number 2 words, vestry clothes, and waited. He arrived without bodyguards because men like Carr think the city is their bodyguard. He wore a coat that had never learned rain and shoes that had walked important carpets. You've been industrious, he said. People who tidy churches are always industrious. You had theft and ritual, Kellan said. You used the words that make good men stop looking. I used the working parts of belief. Carr said, absolution is priceless and underregulated. Hale didn't ask a question. He held up the demo box and let Carr see it. Carr's mouth made a shape that said interesting, and you aren't supposed to have that, and I will. He recovered. You can't win, he said mild. You can only become paperwork. The parish keeps immaculate records. Then we file ours on top, Hale said. Carr stepped closer, interested in him, as if finally noticing an author's name on the spine of a book he'd been using to prop a door. Mr. Hale, he said, they made you a company to save you from yourself. You could still choose ease. You could issue invoices for training and buy a gentler coat. I can afford cold, Hale said. I can't afford absolution. For a man who loves numbers, you're sentimental, Carr said. He looked past Hale to the dark mouth of the Undercroft, then to the small square of sky a level up where daylight fell like a benediction on concrete. This is where you think I confess, he added. You've misunderstood the liturgy. We're not asking you to confess, Kellan said. We're telling you the offertory's over. She took a step, just enough to shift who owned the center of the space. Carr held her gaze the way a handling priest holds a bead. You'll run out of paper, he said softly. I never do. Kellan's phone buzzed. March. Order 45 25ths granted. Parish Tech. CGF upstairs, plus personal devices avail. Protective detail in place. Penn called my boss. He lost. Kellan put the phone away without showing it. The parish will not save you, she said. It will misfile you. There's a difference. Carr smiled because that's what he did when anyone suggested a shape he hadn't drawn. Midnight, he said. Bring the ledger. We'll make a sacrament of it. We don't bring books to people who eat paper, Hale said. Carr inclined his head, as if awarded a clever line at a dinner party. Then bring mercy, he said, and left unhurried, into a day that didn't change course for him. They stood in the echo a moment longer, breathing the concrete's old prayers. When they came up into the light, the city had begun to rearrange itself around headlines and men who claimed to welcome candles in their houses. Midnight, Hale said. Not their midnight, Kellan replied. Ours. He waited for her to explain. She didn't. She didn't need to. He heard it in the spaces between her words. At midnight, they wouldn't go to churches or podiums. They'd go to the place where sacristy sermons turned into payments. The office where Vail did not go because he was afraid of server rooms. The floor where Penn's signature was a machine. The room where Carr's hand hovered and didn't have to press down. Numbers, Hale said. As liturgy, but this time the right is ours. Kellan looked east, where the river lifted its shoulders like a man about to tell the truth. Get some food, she said. Get small sleep. Tell yourself you're brave twice and a coward once. At 11 we dress as cleaners again, and at midnight we turn off the lights. Sacristy, sacristy, she said, and then if we've earned it, mercy. Chapter 11. The Midnight Ledger. The city at midnight was honest in a way daylight could never be. Streetlights trembled in puddles, trains whispered like promises no one kept, and the office towers of government districts stood awake, lit by the sleepless work of guilt. Thomas Hale watched the reflections from the passenger seat of the van. He was wearing a janitor's badge that said R. Murphy, a name borrowed from a man who no longer existed on paper. Across from him, Kellan tied her hair back and checked a pistol she wasn't supposed to have. 2 minutes until the sweep, she said. Security rotation runs every 30, with a cleaning crew that doesn't exist between shifts. March's voice came softly through the comm. Cameras in Pod F3 are looped. You've got 15 minutes before the system sniffs itself. If you find a box labeled Sacristy Mirror or Parish Router, you keep it breathing until my techs can copy. If you find a man, you do not shoot unless you plan to explain in Latin. The van rolled to a quiet halt by the back gate of the Milton Keynes data farm. The gate buzzed open as if tired of having rules. Inside, the path was lit by sodium lamps that made everything look like memory. Pod F3 waited at the far end, another metal block, unmarked, humming softly with secrets. Kellan stepped out first, keys in hand, posture of a person born to be overlooked. Hale followed. Wheeling had been filled with cables and cloth. The guard in the side booth didn't even look up. Midnight cleaners had no stories worth knowing. Inside, the air was cold and electric. Server racks glowed in slow pulses. Fans whispered a lullaby from machines. They moved past 2 rows, turned left at a junction marked utility access only, and found a door with a small plate. Sacristy core/restricted. The handle turned without resistance. That was never a good sign. Kellan crouched by the frame and checked for wires. It's armed, she whispered. Not explosive, just aware. Hale passed her the deacon fob. Will that get us through? She nodded. If we're lucky, and if they haven't rotated the saints again. She held the fob to the scanner. The light turned green with a small chime. For a heartbeat, the air in the corridor seemed to exhale. Inside, the room was smaller than he expected. A chamber lined with servers, cables coiled like veins, and a desk at the far wall holding a single monitor and an old leather-bound book. The title on the spine read Sacristy Register 03/physical log. Paper in the machine room, Kellan said. That's confidence. Hale stepped forward. The monitor displayed a live dashboard of transactions. Columns of names, numbers, and dates, all moving faster than thought. Disbursal approved. Pen _04. Countersign, Wakefield _ receipt, ROS _Dean _1. He scrolled down. The newest entries had no names at all. Just one word repeated. Carr. Then another. Carr A.S. Shepard. Jesus, he whispered. Not tonight, Kellan said. March's voice broke in. We're in the mirror. Reading data. Something's wrong, bandwidth spiking. Someone else is pulling the same files. Carr, Kellan said. He's deleting his liturgy. Copy faster, March snapped. If he zeroes that ledger before we duplicate, the audit dies. Hale opened the physical book. Each page was headed with a date and a single handwritten line. Motion carried. Tokens rotated. Disbursal blessed. Below the signatures, a small red stamp in the shape of a cross. Every few pages, a new ink, a different hand. The same sentence repeated like prayer. Kellan pointed at the monitor. He's transferring the system to a fallback. See that? Sacristy _clone _4. If it finishes, he takes everything off our stage. Hale thought for a moment, then unplugged the monitor from its port. The screen went black. Kellan raised an eyebrow. That won't stop it. No, he said, but it will make him look. He picked up the phone on the desk and dialed the last number in its memory. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Mr. Hale. Carr said, smooth as ever. I was just thinking of you. You're erasing yourself. Hale said, you think if you wipe your name from the parish, the city will forgive you? I don't believe in forgiveness, Carr said. Only records. And I've been very diligent with mine. Then let me add one line, Hale said, glancing at Kellan. You've lost control of your own sermon. Carr laughed, a dry, genuine sound. We'll see. The connection ended. A moment later, the overhead lights flickered. The servers began to whine. Fans spooling into overdrive. On the monitor, new text scrolled. Token reset. Initiated. Backup channel. Active. Cleanse sequence. Confirm. March. Kellan called into her mic. We're losing the core. Hold position. March's voice came. If the sequence completes, the mirror dies. But if we cut power before the copy finishes, we lose evidence. So we wait, Hale said. For once, Kellan said, we pray. The seconds dragged. The screen scroll lines of code like a confession too fast to read. Hale watched as the percentage counter crept upward. 88%, 91%, 95%. Then, with a soft chime, the mirror feed in March's van pinged green. Got it, she said. Cut it. Kellan through the main breaker. The lights died. The servers wound down into a slow, mournful hum. In the dark, only the faint glow of emergency exit signs painted the room. They waited for alarms that didn't come. The silence stretched. Finally, Kellan breathed out. It's done, she said. Not yet, Hale said. Look. The monitor flickered once more, running on residual power. A final message appeared, single line, white on black. Mass rescheduled 9 o'clock, St. Brides. Kellan swore quietly. He's not done. March's voice came through, distant, urgent. You've done enough. We have the mirror, the ledger, the hashes. Get out. But Hale was still staring at the book. The last entry glistened in fresh ink, still wet. Carr/Wakefield/Dean/Pen. Attendance marked. Motion, closure. Below, a blank space where a signature should be. Who's missing? Kellan asked. Hale looked at her. Me. Before she could stop him, He took her pen and signed the name Thomas Hale on the final line. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Closing it," he said. "If the parish runs on names, let it choke on mine." He tore the page clean from the book and folded it into his jacket. Sirens bloomed in the distance, slow at first, then rising. March's voice crackled. Security's awake. "Out! Now!" They ran. Through corridors lit like afterthoughts, down stairwells that smelled of hot dust and secrets, past a booth where the guard finally looked up and saw what was left of his night. Outside, the van's headlights flashed twice. Kellan dove into the passenger seat. Hale right behind her. March was driving, eyes forward, knuckles white. "Did you get it?" she asked. He handed her the torn page. "Got him," he said, "and maybe myself." March didn't look at it yet. She just drove faster. Behind them, the Milton Keynes data farm burned with fire that had no visible flames, just a slow, deliberate glow of systems dying. Kellan leaned back, eyes closed. "So that's it. For now," Hale said, but he wasn't sure, because the night wasn't silent. In the distance, church bells began to ring, 3 times, evenly spaced, a signal or a warning. And somewhere far from the city, in the parish of St. Bride's, a single light blinked back to life. Chapter 12. The Bells of St. Bride's. Morning came without color. The rain had washed everything to neutrality, and the sky hung low over Fleet Street, like a curtain waiting for its cue. Thomas Hale walked ahead of Kellan, the page from the sacristy ledger folded flat in his inner pocket, a piece of paper heavier than any weapon. St. Bride's was awake before the city. A maintenanceman stood by the curb, back doors open. Inside, cables coiled like snakes, and a single man in coveralls leaned against the doorframe smoking, as if it were a sacrament. Hale recognized the posture long before he saw the face. Carr. He looked almost rested, which made him wrong. "Mr. Hale," he said, the voice soft enough to seem polite. "You've been industrious. Do you know the trouble with diligence?" "No," Hale said, "but I'm guessing you do." Carr smiled and stepped aside, gesturing to the open church doors. "Come in. The bells are rehearsing." Kellan's hand brushed the inside of her coat. He shook his head. Not yet. They went in together. Inside, the church smelled of polish and time. Dust motes drifted through the cold light from the high windows. At the chancel, a single lamp burned, its circle of gold resting on the open lectern. Carr's voice followed them up the nave. "You think the story ends with ledgers and tokens. It never does. Systems only disguise hunger. You remove one, another grows." "You built this one," Kellan said. "You and Wakefield." "I built the language," Carr corrected. "They gave it meaning. Bureaucrats always need a god they can audit." He walked toward the altar, each step leaving a faint echo in the empty church. "You've come for closure. You'll find it in the book you stole." Hale held his gaze. "It's over. March has the data, the mirror, the warrants." Carr nodded with a kind of sad admiration. "Yes, she'll file them. There'll be hearings, headlines, then committees. The foundation will rebrand. Someone will quote scripture. In 6 months, the same money will flow again under a new name. Sacristy, parish, mercy. Pick your theology. We build systems because people love structure more than truth. Then why are you still here?" Hale asked. Carr glanced up toward the tower. "Because I wanted to hear the bells." They rang then, as if summoned. Low, deep, deliberate. 3 strokes, pause, 3 again. The pattern from the data farm screen. A trigger. Kellan moved first, hand on her pistol, eyes sweeping the transept. She saw it almost immediately. A small metallic box fixed at the base of a column, a red LED blinking in rhythm with the bells. "March," she said into her mic. "We got a device." "North aisle, structural column." March's voice came back sharp. "Thermite load, remote ignition. We're cutting power now." Carr raised his hands slightly. "Don't worry. It's not for you. It's for what you think you've saved." The lights flickered, went dark, then steadied again. Somewhere above them, breakers tripped like a heartbeat skipping. You'd burn the church? Hale said. I'd let it cleanse itself, Carr replied. Everything begins in confession and ends in fire. Kellan stepped forward, gun leveled. Step away from the column. He didn't. He looked at Hale instead. You put your name in my book. That makes you part of the right. When they read it back, you'll be the man who closed the circle. Not me. Hale pulled the folded page from his jacket. Then maybe I'll rewrite it. He tore it in half. The sound was small, but final. Carr's expression flickered. Anger, then something close to relief. Good, he said quietly. Now none of us owns the ending. Outside, tires shrieked. March's voice cut in again. Device disarmed. Repeat, disarmed. We're safe. Kellan lowered the pistol. Hale stepped closer to Carr. You're coming with us. Carr smiled one last time. You still think arrests matter. You still think paper keeps anyone safe. Then he turned toward the altar, placed both hands on the rail, and whispered something neither of them caught. The lamp beside him flared once and went out. By the time they reached him, he was gone, not vanished, gone in the way of people who prepared their exits with the city's help. The side door to the vestry swung gently on its hinges. Beyond it, only morning light. Kellan exhaled. He's a ghost in his own parish. He'll run, Hale said. No, March's voice replied over the channel. He won't get far. We have his trail. Focus on the living. An hour later, the bells fell silent. Reporters gathered on Fleet Street, asking questions no one answered. March met them on the steps, gave a statement so carefully worded it could survive 3 governments. Investigation ongoing. Evidence secured. Witness protected. Kellan watched from the shade of the doorway, arms folded. You think this holds? For now, March said, Carr's name is in every ledger. Wakefield's already in a room with lawyers. Vale's talking faster than we can type. It'll hold long enough for truth to find daylight. Hale stepped out beside them. And Sarah? She's safe, March said, under another name, another door. He nodded, but didn't look satisfied. He stared up at the spire instead, white against the dull sky. You ever notice, he said, how the bells of the city only ring for ceremony? Never for warning. Kellan half smiled. Maybe that's what we're for. They stood there as the street filled again with movement. The noise of traffic, the chatter of tourists, the indifferent rhythm of London returning to work. Inside the church, the lamp on the altar relit itself with a small, stubborn glow, as if the building refused to forget. Hale watched it through the doorway. It's not over, he said. No, Kellan replied. But for once, it's beginning somewhere honest. Chapter 13. The Parish Remains. 3 days after St. Bride's, London forgot to rain. The air felt scrubbed clean, as if the city had been washed for a funeral it refused to attend. Thomas Hale sat in the cafe opposite the Thames, the same one he'd used before meetings that had changed his life. He stirred a coffee gone cold and watched the river crawl past like a long confession. Across from him, Kellan was silent. She had changed clothes, but not posture. You look disappointed, she said at last. I expected headlines, Hale said. Instead, we get silence. Silence means the machinery's working, she replied. Wakefield's under inquiry. Dean's on indefinite leave. Vale's in protective custody, with an ego wound the size of Parliament. Carr's name is a rumor the government denies knowing. That's what victory sounds like. It doesn't sound like anything, Hale said. He pulled the torn halves of the ledger page from his jacket, laid them on the table, and pushed them together without joining them. They'll make myths from this. They always do. She reached over, pressed the halves flat, then folded them once more. Keep it, she said. A reminder that the next system will be smarter. March arrived 10 minutes late. Coat unbuttoned, phone still warm from too many calls. Congratulations, she said without irony. The judge signed permanent seizure on sacristy infrastructure. Every data farm in the network will be audited under Treasury oversight. Which means, Kellan asked, which means the paperwork's now someone else's god, March said. She poured herself half of Hale's coffee, drank, grimaced, bitter as virtue. She slid a file across the table. Witness, S. Born/location redacted. Inside, a photo of Sarah taken in daylight. Different hair, faint smile, a scar healed to a pale memory. She's safe, March said, and she's working for me now, if she feels like it. Some debt you pay by staying alive. Hale looked at the photo longer than he should have. She deserves a clean page. March nodded. So, do you? Which is why you're going to disappear for a while. I don't vanish well. Then learn, she said. The people you anger can wait longer than you can stay awake. She left before either of them could argue. That night, Hale returned to his flat for the first time in weeks. The door still bore the marks of a lock replaced too many times. Inside, the furniture looked exactly as it shouldn't, too tidy, too still. He turned on the lamp, half expecting Carr's voice in the dark. Instead, there was an envelope on the table. No stamp, no handwriting he recognized. Only a seal, a faint cross impressed in wax, colorless, scentless. He broke it. Inside was a single page, typed, "You cannot burn a parish. You can only scatter it. The faithful always find one another. The parish remains." He read it twice, then folded it and set it beside the ledger fragments. Outside, sirens passed without urgency. Somewhere, a church clock struck midnight and kept going, one bell too many, as if correcting itself. At dawn, Kellan found him on the embankment, collar up against a wind that had finally learned restraint. "You got the letter too?" she asked. He nodded. "Same words." "Almost. Mine ended with mass continues." They stood together, watching the first ferries cut across the river. "He's still out there," Hale said. "Carr. The parish. Whatever it is now. Whoever it is." "Then we wait," Kellan said. "And when they ring the bells again, we'll be ready." He smiled faintly. "I thought you didn't believe in saints." "I don't," she said, "but I believe in accounts that balance." The sun climbed through the mist, weak and clean. For a brief moment, the city looked almost redeemed. In a government basement 2 miles away, a technician checked a server status screen. The monitor flickered once, then stabilized. Among the dormant directories of sacristy_archive_3, a new folder appeared. Parish_remains/initiate. Chapter 14. Mercy. The motorway at dawn was a single, endless confession. Headlights flared and died. Trucks drifted like heavy prayers between lanes, and the man in the passenger seat of the silver sedan looked almost peaceful. His name was no longer Carr, not on any system that mattered. The passport in his coat said Richard Venn, consultant, age 52, British national. The photo showed a man who smiled too easily. The driver was quiet, eyes fixed on the horizon. "We'll reach Dover by 7, she said. Carr nodded. "You've done well." "You're sure the documents hold?" "They always hold," he said. "The parish wrote them." He glanced at the countryside sliding past a window, fields washed pale by the early sun, the edges of villages still asleep, England pretending it could rest. He touched the cufflink on his wrist, a small cross of brushed silver, and smiled. "Faith survives," he murmured. At a service station outside Canterbury, he stepped out to stretch his legs. The air smelled of diesel and wet grass. A digital billboard blinked headlines he didn't need to read. Wakefield resigned /Counselor Dean under review/government promises audit of charity funds. He watched the screen change, then turned away. On a nearby bench, a newspaper lay open to the financial section. A small advert caught his eye. Mercy Global Outreach. Restoring trust through compassionate systems. He laughed softly. "Mercy," he said. "Of course." He tore the advert out, folded it, and slipped it into his wallet. Then he walked back to the car and closed the door. "Paris," he said. The driver nodded. The car joined the flow, another unmarked sermon on the road. In London, the rain returned without apology. Sarah Bourne sat at a desk in a room that didn't exist on paper. She had a new name, new credentials, and the quiet weight of someone who had already lived too many versions of herself. The computer before her hummed with a blank desktop, clean, official, empty, She hesitated, then inserted a small USB drive wrapped in a strip of gauze. The system blinked, paused, and opened a single directory. Sacristy_arc_mirror. Inside it, dozens of encrypted folders. One of them was new. Parish_remains. Her cursor hovered. She clicked. Inside, documents, images, and a file named mercy.seed. She double-clicked it. The screen filled with lines of code she didn't recognize. Something recursive, elegant, self-replicating. A network designed built to survive any shutdown. Then a single line appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Hello, scribe. We missed you." Sarah's hand trembled once, then steadied. She reached for the power cable and pulled it. The screen went black. She sat for a long time before speaking to no one in particular. "I told you I wouldn't come, paper." Kellan watched the city from her flat in South Bank, a cup of tea cooling on the sill. Hale's reflection stood behind her. He'd slept less, shaved badly, looked almost human again. "They'll rebuild it," he said. "They already have," Kellan replied. "Different name, new theology, same congregation." He nodded. "And us?" "We stay awake," she said. "That's all we can do." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She read the message, frowned, handed it to him. "Parish line reboot scheduled for audit integration, midnight tonight." Integration. Hale said, "They're folding it into the government network, blessing the infection." "Then we watch," Kellan said. "We don't stop at this time. We just learn its face." He looked out at the city. The rain blurred the lights until London looked like 1,000 confessions bleeding into one another. "I keep thinking about Carr's line," he said, "about how structure always wins." Kellan shook her head. "Not always. Sometimes it eats itself first." They fell silent. The clock on the wall ticked without mercy. At midnight, the city lights flickered once, so briefly no one else noticed. Down by the river, the bells of St. Bride's rang twice and stopped, leaving a silence that felt deliberate. Kellan raised her cup in a small, private salute. "To the parish," she said. Hale smiled, tired but alive. "To what remains." And somewhere beyond the M25, in a data center newly renamed Mercy Corps, a process woke itself, blinked into life, and began to copy the parish remains. Thank you for listening. This was the VIPER Ledger by Arthur Blackwood. The journey continues on the Inktail channel.